The security footage would later show exactly when it happened. 2:47 a.m., executive floor, conference room 12. A janitor in a gray uniform sitting at a terminal that should have been impossible for him to access, his fingers moving across the keyboard like a concert pianist. And on the screen behind him, 9 weeks of corporate failure transforming into something nobody thought possible anymore. By morning, that footage would destroy careers, expose million-dollar fraud, and prove that the most brilliant mind in the building had been emptying trash cans for 4 years. But right now, at 2:47 a.m., Lucas Bennett was just trying to fix what nobody else could. Want to see how a single father disguised as a janitor brought down an empire of lies? Stay until the end. This story gets wild. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. The executive floor of Apex Dynamics smelled like expensive carpet cleaner and the particular kind of silence that only exists in corporate towers after midnight. Lucas Bennett pushed his cleaning cart past glass-walled offices where monitors still glowed with abandoned spreadsheets and half-written emails, the digital ghosts of people who made in one day what he made in 2 months. He'd been doing this for 4 years now. 4 years of squeak, squeak, squeak across polished marble. 4 years of being invisible. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen, his neighbor who watched Emma while he worked nights. She finally fell asleep. Asked when you'd be home. Told her morning, like always. Lucas felt that familiar twist in his chest. Emma was 8 now, smart as hell, which terrified him, because smart people got noticed and noticed people got crushed. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. He texted back, "Thank you. I owe you. You owe me nothing. That girl's an angel." Lucas smiled despite himself. Emma was an angel. She was also the only reason he hadn't completely disappeared after everything fell apart. When your wife walks out because you're suddenly unemployable, when your best friend steals everything you built and leaves you with nothing but a ruined name, when every door in the industry slams in your face, you need something to keep you vertical. For Lucas, that something had been a 7-pound infant with his eyes and her mother's talent for asking questions he couldn't answer. "Why can't you do computer stuff anymore, Daddy? Why do we live here instead of the big house? Why does your friend Adrian have your job?" That last one had come 6 months ago, after Emma found an old tech magazine in a waiting room. Adrian Mercer's face on the cover, standing in front of the Apex Dynamics logo, credited with revolutionary AI architecture that Lucas had designed in a cramped apartment while Adrian brought him coffee and promised partnership. Lucas had thrown the magazine away and told Emma that sometimes people take credit for things that aren't theirs, and that was just how the world worked. She'd looked at him with those serious 8-year-old eyes and said, "That's not fair." "No," Lucas had agreed. "It's not." Now he was on the 34th floor, the executive level where Adrian had an office with a view of the entire city. Lucas had been in there once to empty the trash. Adrian hadn't been there, which was good, because Lucas didn't know what he'd do if they were ever in the same room again. Probably nothing. That was the thing about getting beaten down completely. You stopped fantasizing about revenge and started just trying to survive. The cart's left wheel was acting up again, pulling hard to the right. Lucas made a mental note to fix it tomorrow before his shift. He'd gotten good at fixing things with whatever was available. Duct tape, zip ties, pure stubbornness. He was heading toward the supply closet when he noticed the light coming from conference room 12. That was weird. This floor was supposed to be empty. Security did a sweep at 11, and everyone on the executive team cleared out by 10. It was one of the few perks of working nights. No people, no questions, no risk of running into anyone who might recognize him from before. Lucas approached slowly, the cart's squeak suddenly too loud in the silent hallway. The door was cracked open about 3 inches. Through the gap, he could see monitors, at least 6 of them, arranged in a semicircle. And on those monitors, code. Lots of it. The kind of dense, intricate architecture that made his brain automatically start parsing syntax, even though he'd spent 4 years trying to shut that part of himself off. He should have kept walking. He had an 8-year-old daughter at home and a job that paid just enough to keep them fed. Getting curious about things that weren't his business was exactly the kind of behavior that had destroyed his life the first time around. But Lucas had always been a different person at 2 a.m. than he was during daylight hours. Something about the darkness made him feel like the old version of himself might still exist somewhere under the gray uniform and the exhaustion. He pushed the cart against the wall and stepped closer to the door. The code on the screens was a mess. No, worse than a mess. It was architectural disaster, the kind of tangled logic that happened when too many developers tried to fix something without understanding the foundational structure. He could see at least 4 different coding styles fighting each other, patches layered on patches, the digital equivalent of trying to fix a bridge by adding more bridges on top of it. And then he saw what they were trying to build. His breath caught. It was the Helix protocol. His Helix protocol. The same distributed AI architecture he'd designed 6 years ago in that cramped apartment with Adrian watching over his shoulder and promising they'd change the world together. The same system Adrian had presented to investors 3 months after Lucas's professional death, claiming sole authorship and walking away with $40 million in funding. Lucas had read about it in the tech press while working his first janitorial job at a hospital. He'd thrown up in a bathroom stall after seeing Adrian's interview where he called the Helix protocol "my life's work," and a vision that came to me in a moment of clarity. That vision had actually come to Lucas over 8 months of 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and the naive belief that talent and hard work mattered. Now here it was, running, barely, on the executive floor of Apex Dynamics, and from what Lucas could see on the monitors, it was dying. The error logs were cascading. Memory leaks everywhere. The core routing algorithm was bottlenecking so hard it had probably been useless for weeks. Whoever had tried to implement this had fundamentally misunderstood how the neural pathways were supposed to integrate with the processing layers. Adrian had never understood that part. Lucas had tried to explain it to him a dozen times back when they were partners. Adrian was smart, brilliant even, but his brain worked linearly. He could optimize existing code, make things faster and cleaner, but he couldn't see the architecture the way Lucas could. He couldn't visualize the entire system as a living thing that needed room to breathe and grow. That's why Adrian had needed Lucas. And when Lucas had been destroyed, Adrian had needed someone else. Looking at these monitors, it was obvious he'd found a whole team of someone else's, and they were all drowning. Lucas checked his phone. 2:51 a.m. He had the executive floor to himself for at least another 4 hours. Security wouldn't loop back until 7, and even then they'd just wave at him and keep walking. Invisible janitor. Background noise. He stepped into the conference room. The door clicked shut behind him, and suddenly he was alone with the screens and the code and 4 years of buried expertise screaming at him to fix what was broken. Just look, he told himself. Just see how bad it really is. He rolled the chair closer to the main terminal and started scrolling through the architecture documents. Oh, it was bad. It was catastrophically bad. The team had tried to scale the neural networks without reinforcing the base processing structure. They'd added 17 different authentication layers that were fighting each other for priority. The data routing system was configured backward in at least 3 critical junctions, and someone, probably multiple someones, had hard-coded temporary fixes directly into the primary algorithms instead of isolating them in separate modules. This wasn't just broken. This was broken by people who didn't understand what they were breaking. Lucas felt something he hadn't felt in 4 years. Anger. Not the dull, defeated anger of losing everything. Sharp anger. Technical anger. The kind of anger that came from watching people mutilate something beautiful because they didn't respect it enough to understand it first. He opened the command interface. Just to see, he told himself, just to understand how they'd managed to screw this up so completely. His fingers hit the keyboard, and suddenly it was 6 years ago, and he was 26 and brilliant and convinced that good work would protect him. The muscle memory was still there. The syntax came back like breathing. He navigated through the system architecture with the ease of someone who'd designed every pathway, every junction, every failsafe. Because he had designed them, all of them. And now he could see exactly where Adrian's team had broken them. The core issue was in the processing distribution algorithm. They tried to force parallel processing without understanding that this particular architecture needed cascading integration. You couldn't just throw more processors at it and expect better performance. The system had to learn to distribute its own workload organically, the way a human brain developed neural pathways through use rather than design. Lucas had spent 3 months figuring that out the first time. Adrian's team had spent 9 weeks making it worse. He checked his phone again. 3:07 a.m. If he left now, he could finish his shift, go home, make Emma breakfast, and pretend he'd never seen any of this. That was the smart move, the safe move. The move that wouldn't risk the fragile stability he'd built for himself and his daughter. Lucas looked at the screens, at his work being tortured by incompetence and arrogance, and felt something shift inside him. Screw safe. He cracked his knuckles and got to work. The first thing he did was create an isolated testing environment so he wouldn't accidentally make anything worse. The second thing was to map the entire current architecture so he could identify every single modification that had been made since the original design. There were hundreds of them. Most were wrong. Some were catastrophically wrong. A few showed genuine intelligence trying to solve problems that shouldn't have existed in the first place. Lucas started stripping away the layers of patches and temporary fixes, carefully preserving anything that showed original thinking while removing the band-aid solutions that were strangling the system. It was like archaeological excavation, scraping away centuries of sediment to find the original structure underneath. At 3:42 a.m., he found the biggest problem. Someone had tried to optimize the neural pathway formation by pre-programming common patterns instead of letting the AI develop them organically. It was clever, in theory. It should have made the system faster and more efficient. Instead, it had lobotomized the entire learning capacity. The Helix protocol worked because it could adapt, learn, grow. You fed it problems and it developed novel solutions by creating its own processing pathways. That was the revolutionary part. That was what made it worth $40 million. But you couldn't pre-program evolution. You had to let it happen. Lucas deleted 6,000 lines of code and replaced them with 200 that restored the original adaptive framework. Then he rebuilt the processing distribution algorithm from scratch, this time with better optimization for the hardware they were actually using instead of the theoretical specs from his original design. At 4:15 a.m., he ran the first test. The system crashed. "Come on," Lucas muttered, diving back into the diagnostic logs. "Show me what's wrong." There. A conflict between the restored adaptive pathways and one of the authentication layers the team had added. The security protocols were strangling the learning algorithms before they could establish stable patterns. He isolated the authentication system, rebuilt it with proper integration hooks, and ran the test again. This time the system stayed up for 47 seconds before crashing. Progress. Lucas worked faster now, his fingers flying across the keyboard, his brain running on pure technical focus, and the kind of adrenaline that only came from solving impossible problems. He'd forgotten how this felt, how good it felt, how right. For 4 years he'd been half a person, the brilliant part of him locked away because using it only reminded him of everything he'd lost. But here, alone in the darkness with code that needed him, he could be whole again. At 5:03 a.m., the system stayed up for 8 minutes. At 5:34 a.m., it ran for 26 minutes without errors. At 5:58 a.m., Lucas initiated a full integration test with live data processing, and the Helix protocol came alive on the monitors like watching something wake up from a coma. The neural pathways started forming. The adaptive algorithms began optimizing themselves. The processing distribution balanced perfectly across all available resources. It was working. It was actually working. Lucas sat back in the chair, staring at the screens, feeling something he couldn't quite name. Relief. Vindication. The bitter satisfaction of proving that he'd been right all along, that his design was brilliant, that Adrian had needed him. The timestamp on the main monitor read 6:12 a.m. He'd fixed in less than 4 hours what Apex Dynamics' entire engineering team couldn't fix in 9 weeks. And nobody would ever know. That thought should have made him angry, but mostly he just felt tired. Tired and strangely at peace. He'd done something good tonight. Something pure. Not for recognition or money or revenge, just because it needed to be done and he was the only one who could do it. Lucas started shutting down his access, covering his digital tracks, making sure there was no evidence that anyone had touched the system. He'd leave it running, and in a few hours some engineer would walk in and think they'd finally had a breakthrough. Let them. Let Adrian take credit again. Lucas had Emma waiting at home, and a life that was small, but his, and he didn't need... The conference room door opened. Lucas spun in the chair, his heart suddenly hammering, and found himself looking at a woman in an expensive gray suit holding a tablet, her dark hair pulled back severely, her eyes sharp and intelligent and currently staring at him like he was a ghost. Victoria Hale, CEO of Apex Dynamics. Youngest in the company's history at 30 years old. And based on the expression on her face, She just caught the night janitor sitting at a terminal containing the company's most classified project. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Victoria's eyes shifted to the monitors behind him, to the Helix protocol running clean for the first time in 9 weeks, and something changed in her expression. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. Lucas stood up slowly, very aware that he was still wearing his gray maintenance uniform, very aware that he'd just committed about 17 different security violations, very aware that the best thing to do would be to apologize and run. Instead, he heard himself say, "Someone who used to be good at this." Victoria stepped into the room and let the door close behind her. She moved past him to look at the monitors, her eyes scanning the code, the processing logs, the neural pathway formation that was still building in real time. "This is running," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "It's been broken for 9 weeks." "I know." "How long have you been working on it?" Lucas checked his phone. "About 3.5 hours. Victoria turned to look at him, and the expression on her face was something between disbelief and fury and a strange kind of hope that made Lucas's chest tight. "You fixed Project Helix in 3.5 hours. "I didn't fix it," Lucas said. "I just put it back the way it was supposed to be. The way it was—" Victoria stopped, started again. "Who are you?" And Lucas realized he had a choice. He could lie, give her a fake name, claim he'd just gotten lucky, disappear back into the safe anonymity of being nobody. Or he could tell the truth and risk everything. He looked at the monitors, at his work running the way it was always meant to run, and felt that shift inside him again, that feeling of being whole. "My name is Lucas Bennett," he said, "and 6 years ago I designed the architecture you're looking at." Victoria's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. "Lucas Bennett, I know that name." Of course she did. She was the CEO. She would have done her research on Project Helix, and somewhere in that research, buried under layers of Adrian Mercer's bullshit, would be Lucas's name. "You were Adrian's partner," Victoria said slowly. The one who got erased," Lucas finished. "Yeah, that was me." "Adrian said you had a breakdown, that you couldn't handle the pressure of development and had to be removed from the project." Lucas laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Adrian said a lot of things. Most of them were lies." Victoria studied him for a long moment. Then she looked back at the monitors. "Walk me through what you did," she said. "What?" "The fix. I want to understand what was wrong and how you corrected it." Lucas hesitated. This felt like a trap. Like any second security would burst in and drag him out, and Victoria would go back to trusting Adrian because powerful people always protected each other. But Victoria just pulled out a chair and sat down, her eyes on the screens, waiting. So Lucas talked. He explained the cascading integration problem, the pre-programmed neural pathways that had killed the adaptive learning, the authentication conflicts, the processing distribution failures. As he talked, he could see Victoria's expression changing, could see her understanding exactly how badly her team had screwed this up. "They've been throwing engineers at this for 2 months, she said when he finished. Adrian personally reviewed every proposed solution. "Adrian doesn't understand this architecture," Lucas said. "He never did. He's brilliant at optimization and implementation, but he can't see the organic structure. That was always my part." "Your part," Victoria repeated. The part Adrian claimed was his vision. "Yes." Victoria stood up and walked to the windows. Dawn was starting to break over the city, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. From up here, the world looked clean and organized and fair. "Do you know how much this project is worth to us?" she asked. "No." "Everything. Project Helix is the foundation for our entire next-generation platform. We've already sold implementation contracts worth $400 million. And for 9 weeks, we've been hemorrhaging resources trying to make it work while our clients get increasingly nervous and our competitors circle like sharks." She turned to face him. "Adrian told me 3 days ago that we might need to scrap the entire project and start over. That would have destroyed this company." Lucas didn't say anything. What was there to say? That Adrian had stolen his life's work and couldn't even keep it running? That felt too small and bitter for this moment. "How did you end up working here as a janitor?" Victoria asked. "I needed a job that didn't require references or background checks. Maintenance work is invisible. Nobody looks too closely." "Why this building?" Lucas smiled without humor. Honestly, I didn't know Adrian worked here until after I'd been hired. By then, I needed the paycheck too badly to quit. I figured the executive floor was big enough that I'd never run into him. And you've been here for how long? 4 years? Victoria's expression shifted to something that looked like anger, but not at him. You've been cleaning the floors of the company running your stolen work for 4 years, and nobody noticed. Nobody looks at janitors. Apparently not. Victoria was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What happened? With Adrian, I mean. What's the real story?" Lucas hadn't talked about this in years, hadn't let himself think about it in detail because the anger and shame and helplessness were too heavy to carry around every day. But standing here in this conference room at dawn with the Helix protocol running perfectly on the screens behind him, he found the words. He told her about the partnership, the trust, the late nights in his apartment building the architecture while Adrian handled the business side, the promises of changing the world together. He told her about the investor meeting Adrian had scheduled without telling him, how Lucas had shown up to find out Adrian had presented the entire project as his own work, how when Lucas had confronted him, Adrian had smiled and said, "Who's going to believe you?" He told her about the non-compete clauses Adrian had somehow gotten him to sign early on, clauses Lucas hadn't understood were designed to prevent him from ever working in AI development again. About the smear campaign that painted Lucas as unstable, difficult, impossible to work with. About his wife leaving because she'd married a rising tech genius, not a janitor with no prospects. About Emma, who was 6 months old when everything fell apart and didn't know her father had once been someone important. Victoria listened without interrupting, and when Lucas finished, she asked one question. "Can you prove any of this?" Adrian was careful. He buried his tracks. "I have some early architecture documents with my name on them, but he claimed those were preliminary work he'd hired me to do. Without access to the original code repositories and development timelines, I can't prove I designed the core system." "What if you had that access?" Lucas looked at her. "What?" Victoria's smile was sharp and cold. "Adrian works for me, which means his project files work for me, and I'm very good at finding things people think they've hidden. Why would you help me? Because you just saved my company, and because I don't like being lied to, and because if Adrian Mercer has been running my technology division based on stolen work, I want to know about it." She paused. "Also, you fixed in 3 hours what my entire engineering team couldn't fix in 9 weeks, and that makes you the most valuable person in this building." Lucas's phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Chen. "Emma's up. Making breakfast. You on your way?" "I have to go," Lucas said. "My daughter, how old? 8? Victoria nodded slowly. "Tomorrow night. Come back tomorrow night, same time. I'll have the access you need to prove your case. And Lucas?" She held out her hand. "Thank you for not walking away from this." Lucas shook her hand, feeling the surreal weight of the moment. 12 hours ago, he'd been invisible. Now the CEO of Apex Dynamics was thanking him. He didn't trust it yet. Didn't trust that this wasn't just another way to get crushed. But looking at Victoria's face, at the steel in her eyes, he thought maybe she was the kind of person who meant what she said. "I'll be here," he told her. Lucas left the conference room, grabbed his cleaning cart, and finished his shift like normal. He clocked out at 7 a.m., walked to the bus stop, and rode across the city as the sun came up fully. Mrs. Chen met him at the door of his apartment building. "Long night?" she asked. "You have no idea." Emma was sitting at the tiny kitchen table with a bowl of cereal, still in her pajamas, reading a book that was probably too advanced for her age. She looked up when Lucas walked in and grinned. "Daddy!" He hugged her, breathing in the smell of kid shampoo and sleep, and felt the weight of what he'd done settle over him. He'd broken cover. After 4 years of being invisible, of keeping his head down and surviving, he'd chosen to be seen, and there was no going back now. Lucas didn't sleep that day. He tried. He put Emma on the school bus at 8:15, came back to the apartment, lay down on the couch that doubled as his bed, and stared at the ceiling for 3 hours while his brain refused to shut off. What had he done? The smart play would have been to walk away, to let the system fail, to keep his head down and his mouth shut and his daughter fed. That was survival. That was what 4 years of being invisible had taught him. Instead, he'd fixed the unfixable in front of the one person in the building who could actually do something about it. And now Victoria Hale knew who he was. Victoria Hale, who'd built her reputation on being ruthless and smart and impossible to manipulate, who'd become CEO at 30 by outmaneuvering executives twice her age, who probably had lawyers who could bury Lucas so deep he'd never see daylight again if she decided he was a problem. His phone rang at 11 a.m. Unknown number. Lucas stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Mr. Bennett?" A woman's voice, professional, cool. Not Victoria. "This is Sarah Chen from Apex Dynamics Executive Services. Ms. Hale has requested that you come to the building this evening at 6 p.m. She'll meet you in the executive parking garage, level 3. There will be a visitor badge waiting for you at the security desk." Lucas's mouth went dry. "Why the parking garage?" "Ms. Hale said you'd prefer discretion." She wasn't wrong. If Lucas walked into Apex Dynamics during business hours, there was a chance someone from the old days would recognize him. Someone who'd believed Adrian's lies. Someone who'd tell Adrian that his destroyed ex-partner was back. "I'll be there," Lucas said. "Excellent. Ms. Hale also wanted me to inform you that she's conducted a preliminary review of Project Helix's development timeline. She said to tell you that you were right about the architecture documents." Lucas sat up straight. "What?" "That's all she said, Mr. Bennett. 6 p.m., level 3. The line went dead. Lucas looked at his phone, then at the clock on the microwave. 7 hours. He got up and made coffee he didn't need, his hands shaking slightly as he poured. Victoria had already started investigating, already found something in the development records that corroborated his story. That was fast. That was maybe too fast. Lucas had learned the hard way that powerful people didn't help without expecting something in return. Victoria wasn't doing this out of kindness. She was doing it because Lucas had value now. He'd proven he could fix what her engineers couldn't. The question was what she'd want in exchange. Emma came home at 3:30, dropped her backpack by the door, and immediately knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked. "Nothing happened." "You look weird." "I look tired." "You always look tired. This is different weird." Emma came over and stood in front of him, arms crossed, using the expression that made her look exactly like her mother. "Did something bad happen at work?" "No. Actually, something maybe good happened." "Maybe good?" "I don't know yet. I have to go somewhere tonight to find out." Emma's face fell. "But it's Wednesday. Wednesday's movie night. Damn." He'd forgotten. Wednesday was the one night a week Lucas didn't work. The one night they could pretend to be a normal father and daughter doing normal things like watching movies and eating popcorn. "I know, baby. I'm sorry. This is important." More important than movie night? The honest answer was yes. This might be the thing that changed everything, but Lucas couldn't say that. Not yet. Not when he didn't know if this was real or just another way to get his hopes up before they got crushed. "How about this?" he said. "I'll make you a deal. I go to this meeting tonight, and Saturday we have an all-day movie marathon, your choice. Whatever you want to watch." Emma considered this. "Even the scary one you said I'm too young for?" "How scary are we talking?" "The one with the monsters in the cave." "That's a hard R rating, Em." "I can handle it." Lucas looked at his 8-year-old daughter and saw the stubbornness that was pure him and the fearlessness that came from growing up watching your dad clean floors to keep you fed. She probably could handle it. "Fine. But if you have nightmares, I'm not the one explaining to Mrs. Chen why you're afraid of the dark." Emma grinned and hugged him. "Deal." Mrs. Chen came over at 5:30. Lucas had showered and put on the only decent clothes he owned, khakis and a button-down that didn't quite fit anymore because he'd lost weight over the past few years. He looked in the mirror and saw someone trying very hard to look professional and mostly failing. "You clean up nice," Mrs. Chen said from the doorway. "I look like a substitute teacher." "Better than looking like a janitor going to a meeting with the CEO." Lucas turned to face her. "How did you—" "Emma talks. She said you met someone important at work." Mrs. Chen smiled. "I don't know what this is about, Lucas, but whatever it is, don't let them make you small again." "What if small is safer?" "Safe doesn't put that look in your eyes. You've been half dead for 4 years. Last night you came home looking alive. Don't waste that." Lucas grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, Mrs. Chen's words following him like a challenge he wasn't sure he could meet. The bus ride to the financial district took 40 minutes. Lucas spent it watching the city change from his neighborhood, where buildings leaned and graffiti covered the walls, to the clean glass towers where people like Victoria lived and worked. Two different worlds, separated by about 6 miles and a lifetime of choices. He got off 3 blocks from Apex Dynamics and walked the rest of the way, arriving at exactly 5:58 p.m. The security desk had his visitor badge ready, just like Sarah had promised. The guard looked at Lucas's clothes, then at the badge that said Executive Visitor, and frowned. "You sure you're supposed to be here?" Ms. Hale requested the meeting. The guard's expression shifted from suspicious to carefully neutral. Nobody questioned what Victoria Hale requested. "Level 3, parking garage. Elevators are to your left." Lucas took the badge and walked to the elevators, very aware that he was wearing his nice clothes in a building where nice meant $1,000 suits. A woman in heels and designer everything got on the elevator with him, looked at his badge, looked at his face, and spent the ride pretending he didn't exist. Level 3 was mostly empty. Lucas stepped out into the fluorescent-lit concrete, the smell of exhaust and tire rubber, and saw Victoria standing next to a black Tesla, holding a tablet and looking exactly like someone who'd spent the day running a multi-billion-dollar company. "You're punctual," she said. "I like that." "You said 6. Most people hear 6 and show up at 6:15. Victoria gestured to the car. "Get in. We're not having this conversation in a parking garage." Lucas hesitated. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere we can talk without my entire executive team listening through the walls. I don't trust my office. I barely trust my assistant." "Get in the car, Lucas." It was the first time she'd used his first name, and something about it made the situation feel real in a way it hadn't before. This wasn't CEO and Janitor. This was Victoria and Lucas, 2 people with a problem to solve. He got in the car. Victoria drove like someone who was good at everything, smoothly, efficiently, making decisions without hesitation. They left the parking garage and headed west, away from the financial district, toward the waterfront where old industrial buildings had been converted into expensive restaurants and art galleries. "You found something," Lucas said. It wasn't a question. "I found a lot of things. The question is how much you want to know before we get to the interesting part." "All of it." Victoria smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Adrian's been with Apex for 3 years. He came to us with the Helix protocol fully formed, or so he claimed. Sold us on his vision, impressed the board, got himself appointed CTO based on the promise of what this technology could do. And you bought it." "We bought it. I bought it. Adrian's convincing when he wants to be. Brilliant at presenting ideas, great at managing up, knows exactly what executives want to hear." She paused. "What he's not great at, apparently, is actual execution. Project Helix has been struggling since implementation began. Delays, cost overruns, technical problems that shouldn't exist. Adrian kept saying we needed more resources, better engineers, different hardware. He was blaming everyone but himself. Yes, and I believed him because the underlying architecture seemed sound. The theory was brilliant. It was only the implementation that kept failing." Victoria glanced at him. "Now I know why." She pulled into a parking lot next to a quiet cafe that looked closed. Victoria killed the engine and turned to face Lucas directly. "I spent today in the code repositories. Adrian's very good at covering his tracks, but he's not perfect. There are fragments. Architectural comments with your name attached. Design documents that show your signature before they were edited. And most damningly, the original development timeline shows the core Helix protocol being built in 11 months by one person, you, with Adrian listed as project manager and business lead." Lucas felt something crack open in his chest. "You can prove that?" "I can prove Adrian didn't write the code he claims is his life's work. What I can't prove yet is that he deliberately stole it rather than honestly misremembering his contribution. That's the piece that matters legally." "He stole it? He knew exactly what he was doing." "I believe you, but belief isn't evidence." Victoria pulled up something on her tablet and handed it to him. "This is the employment contract Adrian signed when he came to Apex. Section 12, subsection 4. Read it." Lucas read. The language was dense legal terminology, but the meaning was clear. Adrian had warranted that all intellectual property he brought to Apex Dynamics was either his original work or properly licensed. Any violation of that warranty made him personally liable for damages and gave Apex grounds for immediate termination. "If we can prove he lied about creating the Helix protocol," Victoria said, "we can fire him, reclaim the signing bonus and stock options, and potentially sue for fraud. But it has to be airtight. Adrian has connections. He'll fight back hard. So what do you need from me? Everything. Every document you have from the original development, every email, every text message, every scrap of evidence that shows you built this before Adrian took it. And I need you to walk me through the architecture in detail so I understand what you created versus what Adrian contributed. Lucas looked at the tablet, at the contract that could destroy Adrian if they used it right, and felt that old familiar fear creeping back. What happens after? He asked quietly. Let's say we prove everything. Let's say Adrian gets fired and the world knows he's a fraud. What happens to me? Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What do you want to happen to you?" "I want my daughter to be safe. I want a job that doesn't require lying about who I am. I want to stop being invisible." "That's all?" "That's everything." Victoria nodded slowly. "Here's what I'm offering. You help me build the case against Adrian. In exchange, I hire you as a technical consultant on Project Helix. Legitimate contract, real money, your actual name on the paperwork. You fix what Adrian broke, you help my team understand the architecture, and you get credited for your work. And when Adrian finds out I'm there, let me worry about Adrian. Right now, he's suspended pending the outcome of my investigation. He doesn't get to set foot in the building without my approval." "You already suspended him?" "This morning. Told him it was a routine review of project management practices. He doesn't know about you yet." Victoria's smile was sharp. "But he will, soon." Lucas thought about Emma, about the apartment with the leaky faucet and the broken window latch he couldn't afford to fix. About 4 years of being careful and small and safe. Mrs. Chen's voice in his head, "Don't let them make you small again." "Okay," Lucas said. "I'm in." Victoria held out her hand. They shook on it, and Lucas felt the weight of the decision settle over him like a coat he'd forgotten he used to wear. They spent the next 2 hours in that parking lot going through everything Lucas remembered about the original Helix development. Victoria took notes on her tablet, asked questions that proved she actually understood the technology, and occasionally stopped him to verify details against the files she'd pulled from Apex's system. "You're good at this," Lucas said at one point. "At what?" "Technical investigation. Most CEOs wouldn't know what questions to ask." "I started as an engineer," Victoria said. "Worked my way up through product development before switching to the business side. I might not be able to code at your level, but I can read architecture documents and spot bullshit when I see it." "Is that how you made CEO at 30? "That's how I survived long enough to make CEO at 30. The actual appointment involved a lot of politics and one very well-timed merger that I orchestrated." She looked at him. "You could have done the same thing, you know. If Adrian hadn't destroyed you, you'd probably be running your own company by now." "Maybe. Or maybe I'd have crashed and burned anyway. I was never good at the business side." "But Adrian was." "Yeah, that's what made us a good team. I built things. He sold them. I trusted him to handle everything I wasn't good at, and he—" Lucas stopped. He knew that. He knew I'd never question the contracts or the business arrangements because I didn't understand them. He used that. "Smart," Victoria said. "Evil, but smart." "Is there a difference?" "In business? Not usually." At 8:30, Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at it and frowned. "I have to take this. It's the board chair." She got out of the car and walked a few feet away, talking in low tones that Lucas couldn't hear. He watched her through the windshield, this 30-year-old woman who'd built an empire and was now risking political capital to help a janitor prove he wasn't crazy. Why was she doing this? The question nagged at him. Victoria was smart and strategic. She didn't make moves without calculating the return. So what was she getting out of helping Lucas besides a functional Helix protocol? Victoria got back in the car, her expression tight. "Problem?" Lucas asked. Adrian's lawyer just sent a letter demanding to know the specific grounds for his suspension and threatening legal action if he's not reinstated within 48 hours. Can he do that? He can try. His contract has a clause about suspension requiring documented cause. I documented technical mismanagement, but his lawyer's arguing that's not sufficient without proof of misconduct. Victoria started the car, which means we need to move faster than I planned. How much faster? I'm calling an emergency board meeting for Friday morning. That gives us less than 2 days to build a case strong enough to justify termination instead of just suspension. Lucas felt his stomach drop. That's not enough time. It's the time we have. Adrian's not stupid. He knows something's wrong, and he's going to start making calls, pulling favors, building his own defense. We have a small window before he realizes what's actually happening. Victoria looked at him. Can you do this? Can you pull together everything we need in 48 hours? Lucas thought about the old files on his laptop at home, the emails he'd saved before Adrian had locked him out of the shared accounts, the architecture notebooks he'd kept even though looking at them hurt. He'd held on to all of it because some part of him had always known this day might come. Yeah, he said, I can do it. Good, because I'm about to make your life very complicated. Victoria drove them back to Apex Dynamics. Instead of dropping Lucas at the parking garage, she pulled into her reserved spot on the executive level and led him to a private elevator that required a keycard to access. Where are we going? Lucas asked. My office. You're going to need workspace and access to the company's systems. At 9 p.m., I do my best work after everyone else goes home. Fewer interruptions, fewer questions. The elevator opened directly into a reception area that was all glass and steel and expensive art. Victoria walked through it like she owned the place, which technically she did, and unlocked a corner office with windows overlooking the entire city. It was the kind of office people worked their whole lives to earn. Lucas stood in the doorway feeling like an imposter in his cheap khakis, while Victoria booted up a workstation and started typing commands. I'm giving you level 4 access to our development servers, she said. That's higher than most of my engineers have. Don't make me regret it. What if someone notices? At 9 p.m. on a Wednesday, the only people here are security and the night cleaning crew. Victoria paused, looked at him. No offense. None taken. I know what I've been. You've been surviving. There's no shame in that. She handed him a key card. This gets you into the building and this floor anytime, day or night. There's a private workspace 2 doors down that's technically Adrian's office, but he's suspended, so it's yours now. Poetic justice. Lucas took the key card, the weight of it feeling significant in his palm. You're trusting me a lot. You fixed the unfixable and didn't ask for anything in return. That's worth trusting. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and sighed. I have to deal with this board situation. Set yourself up in the workspace. Start pulling together whatever documentation you have. I'll be back in an hour and we'll strategize. She left Lucas standing in her office holding a key card that gave him access to the building where he'd spent 4 years being invisible. Adrian's office was exactly what Lucas expected. Expensive furniture, tech awards on the walls, framed magazine covers featuring Adrian's face next to headlines about innovation and vision. There was even a photo of Adrian shaking hands with the previous CEO, both of them smiling like they'd just conquered the world. Lucas looked at that photo for a long moment, then took it off the wall and put it face down in a drawer. He spent the next hour at Adrian's desk pulling files from his laptop. The original architecture documents, the development timeline he'd meticulously tracked, email threads where he'd explained concepts to Adrian in painstaking detail, code samples with his signature embedded in the comments. It was all there. 4 years of evidence that he'd been too hurt and too scared to use. Victoria came back at 10:15 with coffee and a legal pad covered in notes. The board's willing to hear the case Friday at 9 a.m., she said. But they're skeptical. Adrian's been a star performer for 3 years. He brought in major clients, hit revenue targets, talked a good game about innovation. They like him. More than they'll like the truth? We'll find out. Victoria sat down across from him and pulled up something on her tablet. I need you to understand what you're walking into. That boardroom will have 12 people who've built careers on reading people and spotting weakness. They're going to question everything, your credibility, your motives, your mental state. Adrian's lawyer will try to paint you as bitter and delusional. So basically what Adrian did 6 years ago. Exactly. Which means we need to be bulletproof. Victoria looked at the documents Lucas had pulled up. Walk me through your strongest evidence. What's the one thing that proves beyond doubt that you created the Helix protocol? Lucas thought about it. There were dozens of documents, hundreds of emails, but what was the smoking gun? Then he remembered. The core algorithm has a signature, he said, not a digital signature. an architectural signature. The way the neural pathways form, there's a specific pattern that emerges based on how I structured the learning framework. It's like handwriting. You can copy the code, but you can't copy the underlying logic that generates that pattern. Can you prove that pattern is yours? I can show you the same pattern in projects I built before I ever met Adrian. Different applications, same fundamental approach. It's how my brain works. It's how I see distributed systems. Lucas pulled up a file from 8 years ago. This was a university project, and this one was from my first job. And this is the Helix protocol. See the similarity? Victoria studied the screen, her eyes moving between the 3 sets of code. It's like looking at 3 paintings by the same artist. Exactly. Adrian can claim he built Helix, but he can't claim he built my brain. For the first time since this started, Victoria smiled like she believed they might actually win. They worked until 2 in the morning, building the case piece by piece. Victoria was relentless, questioning everything, making Lucas prove every claim, playing devil's advocate so effectively that he started to hate her a little. "If you're this hard on me," he said at one point, "what are you going to do to Adrian?" "Destroy him, but only if you give me the ammunition." She looked at him over the top of her tablet. "I need you to be honest with me about something." "Okay. Is any part of this about revenge?" Lucas thought about lying, about saying it was purely professional, that he just wanted credit for his work and nothing more. But Victoria had been honest with him, and he owed her the same. "Yeah," he said, "some of it's about revenge. Adrian took 6 years of my life. He took my career, my marriage, my daughter's stability. He gets to live in a penthouse and drive a Porsche while I scrape together rent money and eat ramen so Emma can have real food. So yeah, part of me wants to watch him lose everything the way I did." "Good," Victoria said. "Good?" Revenge is a powerful motivator, as long as it doesn't make you sloppy. She leaned back in her chair. "The board's going to ask you why you waited 4 years to come forward. What's your answer?" "I didn't think anyone would believe me." "Why do you think they'll believe you now?" "Because I have you. Because I fixed what Adrian couldn't. Because the truth is in the code, and anyone who actually looks will see it." Victoria nodded. "That'll work. Just don't let them rattle you. Stay calm. Stick to the facts. And remember that you're the smartest person in that room when it comes to this technology. Adrian built his career on making people think he was brilliant. You actually are brilliant. There's a difference." Lucas looked at this woman who barely knew him but was risking her professional reputation to help him, and asked the question that had been bothering him all night. "Why are you doing this? Really? You could have just quietly fixed the Helix problems and never told anyone I was involved. You could have kept Adrian and solved your technical issues without all this drama. So why blow everything up?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "When I was 24, I built a piece of software that revolutionized supply chain logistics. My boss at the time took credit for it, used it to get promoted, and left me behind. When I tried to fight back, HR told me I was being emotional and difficult. They suggested I might be happier at a different company. What did you do?" "I quit. Started my own company, spent 5 years building it from nothing into something valuable enough that Apex Dynamics wanted to acquire it. And when they did, I made sure the acquisition contract included a clause that made me CEO. Victoria's smile was cold. "My old boss works in middle management now. He sends me LinkedIn requests once a year. I ignore them." "So this is personal for you too." "Everything's personal. Anyone who tells you business isn't personal is lying or stupid." Victoria stood up. "It's late. Go home. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we finish building the case, and Friday we take down the man who thought he was untouchable." Lucas gathered his things and headed for the elevator. As the doors started to close, Victoria called out, "Lucas?" He stopped the doors. "Yeah?" "Don't doubt yourself in that boardroom. You earned everything you're about to get back." The elevator doors closed, and Lucas rode down alone, Victoria's words echoing in his head like a promise he was afraid to believe. He caught the last bus home and walked into his apartment at 3 in the morning to find Mrs. Chen asleep on the couch and Emma curled up in her bed, peaceful and unaware that her father's entire world was about to change. Lucas stood in the doorway of her room, watching her sleep, and made a silent promise. Whatever happened on Friday, whether they won or lost, whether Adrian went down or found a way to survive, Lucas was done being invisible. He was done being small, And if the world didn't like it, the world could adjust. Thursday morning came too fast. Lucas woke up on the couch at 7 with his neck cramped and his phone buzzing with a text from Victoria. Board meeting moved to 9 a.m. tomorrow. Adrian's lawyer is pushing hard. We need everything ready by tonight. Lucas sat up, rubbing his eyes, and saw Emma standing in the doorway watching him. You came home late, she said. I had a lot of work to do. Are you in trouble? No, baby. I'm trying to fix something that's been broken for a long time. Emma crossed her arms, that serious expression on her face again. Is it about the thing you don't talk about? The thing that made us move here? Lucas had never told her the full story. She'd been too young when it happened, and later it had seemed easier to just let her think they'd always been this way. Small apartment, tight budget, dad who worked nights and slept days. But Emma was 8 now, smart as hell. She deserved some version of the truth. Yeah, Lucas said. It's about that. Someone took something from me a long time ago, and now I might be able to get it back. Like when Tommy Briggs stole my book report and Ms. Henderson made him give it back. Sort of like that, except instead of a book report, it was my whole job. And instead of Ms. Henderson, there's a scary lawyer and a bunch of important people who might not believe me. Emma came over and sat next to him on the couch. Are you going to fight for it? I'm going to try. Good. You should. Tommy only gave my report back because I told Ms. Henderson exactly what happened and didn't let him lie about it. She looked at Lucas with those serious eyes. Sometimes people lie and get away with it because nobody calls them out. You should call him out. Lucas hugged her, this 8-year-old who'd somehow become wiser than him. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't pay attention because you're tired all the time. Fair point. He got Emma ready for school, made her breakfast, and walked her to the bus stop. As the bus pulled away, she waved at him through the window, and Lucas felt the weight of what he was about to do settle heavier. If this went wrong, if Adrian won again, Lucas would lose more than just his pride. He'd lose the fragile stability he'd built for Emma. The job, the apartment, the careful invisibility that kept them safe. But if he didn't fight, if he walked away now, he'd spend the rest of his life wondering what might have happened if he'd been brave enough to try. Mrs. Chen caught him on the stairs. You look terrible, she said. Thanks. I mean it. You need sleep. I need a lot of things. Sleep's pretty far down the list right now. Mrs. Chen studied him for a moment, then nodded. Okay, but whatever you're doing, don't lose yourself in it. Emma needs her father, not some exhausted ghost. Lucas promised he'd be careful, went back to his apartment, and spent the next 3 hours organizing every piece of evidence he had. The original development notebooks, the email chains, the code samples with his signature embedded in the comments, the university projects that showed his architectural style years before Adrian existed in his life. At noon, his phone rang. Unknown number again. Mr. Bennett, this is Richard Kasdan. I'm Adrian Mercer's attorney. Lucas's stomach dropped. How did you get this number? That's not important. What's important is that I understand you've been making certain claims about my client's work on the Helix protocol. I wanted to give you an opportunity to reconsider before this situation becomes legally complicated. Legally complicated how? Defamation, tortious interference, depending on what accusations you're planning to make tomorrow, potentially criminal fraud. Kasdan's voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of someone who'd destroyed people for a living. Mr. Mercer has been very successful at Apex Dynamics. He has a reputation to protect. If you make false claims that damage that reputation, he will pursue every legal remedy available. They're not false claims. I'm sure you believe that. But belief and evidence are different things. And from what I understand, you've been working as a janitor for the past 4 years. That's a significant gap in your technical credibility. Lucas felt the old shame rising, the voice in his head that said people like Richard Kasdan were right, that janitors didn't get to challenge CTOs, that knowing your place was the price of survival. Then he thought about Emma asking when he'd fight back. Tell Adrian I'll see him tomorrow, Lucas said, and hung up. His hands were shaking. He'd just told Adrian's lawyer to go to hell, which was either the bravest or stupidest thing he'd done in years. Probably both. Victoria called 10 minutes later. Adrian's lawyer just contacted the board. He's claiming you're a disgruntled former employee trying to extort money by making false accusations. That was fast. Adrian's scared, which means he knows we're close to something. Victoria paused. Are you okay? Kazdan's known for intimidation tactics. He threatened to sue me for defamation. Of course he did. That's page 1 of the playbook. Threaten legal action, hope the target backs down before you actually have to follow through. Victoria's voice was steady, calm. Don't let him rattle you. We have evidence. They have Adrian's word. Evidence wins. Does it? Because in my experience, powerful people win even when they're lying. Not this time. I promise you, Lucas, not this time. Lucas wanted to believe her, but he'd heard promises before, and they'd all turned out to be as substantial as smoke. He spent the afternoon at Apex Dynamics, in Adrian's office that was temporarily his, going through development logs with Victoria. They built a timeline that showed exactly when each piece of the Helix protocol had been created, cross-referenced with Lucas's documentation to prove he'd designed every core component. At 4 o'clock, Victoria's assistant knocked on the door. Ms. Hale, the engineers are asking about tomorrow's demo. They want to know if you're still planning to present the Helix fixes. Victoria looked at Lucas. Are we? The system's stable. It'll run clean as long as nobody messes with the core architecture. Then yes, we're presenting. Tell them 9:30 after the board meeting. Victoria waited until her assistant left, then turned back to Lucas. I want you there, at the demo, in front of the engineering team. Why? Because when we expose Adrian tomorrow, there's going to be questions about who actually fixed the system. I want them to see you standing there, answering their technical questions, proving you know this architecture better than anyone in the building. Victoria, I haven't presented technical work in 6 years. I don't know if I can... You fixed the unfixable in 3 hours. You can handle a demo. She pulled up the presentation outline. We'll keep it simple. Show the system running, explain the key fixes, take questions. You don't need to perform. You just need to be yourself. Lucas looked at the presentation outline and felt that old terror rising. The terror of being seen, of being judged, of failing in front of people who mattered. What if I freeze up? Then you freeze up and we work through it. But you won't. I've watched you explain this architecture. You come alive when you talk about your work. That's not something you can fake. They worked on the presentation until 7. Then Victoria ordered food from some expensive place that delivered to the executive floor. They ate at the conference table in her office, surrounded by evidence and legal documents and the weight of tomorrow. Can I ask you something personal? Lucas said. You can ask. I might not answer. When you took down your old boss, the one who stole your work, did it feel good? Victoria was quiet for a moment, picking at her food. It felt necessary. I don't know if it felt good. Mostly it felt like I could finally breathe again. Like I'd been holding my breath for 5 years, waiting for someone to notice I was drowning, and then I realized nobody was coming to save me. So I saved myself. Do you regret it, the way you did it? No. He earned what happened to him. She looked at Lucas directly. Are you asking because you're worried you'll regret this? I'm asking because I don't know if I'm doing this for the right reasons. Is it about justice, or is it just about making Adrian hurt the way he made me hurt? Does it matter? Yeah, it matters. I don't want to be the kind of person who destroys someone just because I can. Victoria set down her fork. Lucas, Adrian didn't just hurt you. He stole your work, ruined your reputation, and profited from it for 6 years. He's been failing upward this entire time while you cleaned floors. That's not justice. That's theft. What we're doing tomorrow isn't revenge. It's correction. It feels like revenge. Good. It should. Revenge gets a bad reputation, but sometimes it's just another word for accountability. She leaned back in her chair. You want to know what I think? I think you're scared that if you let yourself be angry, if you let yourself want to see Adrian lose everything, you'll turn into someone you don't recognize. But anger isn't the enemy. Anger is what keeps you from accepting unacceptable things. Lucas thought about that. About 4 years of swallowing anger, pushing it down, trying to be grateful for scraps because scraps were better than nothing. I'm tired of being grateful for scraps, he said quietly. Then stop. Demand what you earned, and if people don't like it, that's their problem, not yours. They finished eating in silence, and then Victoria's phone rang. She looked at the screen and her expression hardened. It's the board chair. I need to take this. She stepped out of the office, and Lucas could hear her voice through the door, professional but firm, saying things like documented evidence and contractual violations and fiduciary duty. When she came back, she looked tired. Adrian's lawyer is demanding he be allowed to attend the board meeting tomorrow, to face his accuser directly. Lucas felt his chest tighten. Will they let him? The board voted 3-2 in favor. They think it's only fair that Adrian gets to defend himself in person. Victoria sat down heavily. I tried to argue against it, but I was outvoted. So I have to present the evidence with Adrian sitting right there. Yes, watching me, listening to everything, probably ready to tear apart every word I say. Yes. Lucas stood up and walked to the windows, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Adrian was preparing his defense, calling in favors, building his counter-narrative, getting ready to do what he did best, lie convincingly while making Lucas look crazy. I don't know if I can do this, Lucas said. Victoria came to stand beside him. You don't have to. We can call it off right now. I'll tell the board I made a mistake. Adrian gets reinstated, and you go back to your night shift. Nobody would blame you. Yes, they would. I'd blame me. Then what do you need? Lucas thought about Emma, about Mrs. Chen telling him not to let them make him small again, about 4 years of disappearing. I need to remember who I was before Adrian destroyed me. Who were you? Someone who believed good work mattered more than good politics. Someone who thought talent would protect him. Lucas laughed bitterly. Someone incredibly naive. Or someone who hadn't learned yet that the world doesn't reward virtue. It rewards power. Victoria turned to face him. You were naive then. You're not naive now. Use that. Use everything you learned from getting crushed. Adrian thinks he's fighting the scared kid he destroyed 6 years ago. Show him he's wrong. Lucas looked at this woman who barely knew him, but somehow understood exactly what he needed to hear. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet. Thank me after we win. Lucas left Apex Dynamics at 9 and took the bus home through streets that felt different somehow. Sharper. More real. Like he'd been walking through fog for 4 years, and it was finally starting to lift. Emma was already asleep when he got home. Mrs. Chen was waiting with a knowing look. Big day tomorrow? The biggest. You ready? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Mrs. Chen smiled. That's what brave looks like, being terrified and doing it anyway. Lucas checked on Emma one more time before bed, watching her sleep in the small room that was all he could afford. Tomorrow could change that. Tomorrow could change everything. Or tomorrow could destroy the fragile life he'd built, and they'd be worse off than before. He didn't sleep much that night. Friday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of day where the sky looked like it might rain but couldn't quite commit. Lucas put on his one decent suit, the one from his previous life that he'd kept in the back of the closet like a relic from someone else's existence. It still fit, barely. He'd lost weight over the years, and the jacket hung a little loose on his shoulders. Emma watched him get dressed with serious eyes. You look different, she said. Different good or different bad? Just different, like someone I don't know. That hit harder than it should have. Lucas knelt down so he was at her eye level. I'm still me, baby. I'm just wearing different clothes. Are you going to win today? I don't know. I'm going to try. What happens if you lose? Lucas had been avoiding that question, even in his own head. But Emma deserved honesty. If I lose, things stay the same. I keep my night job. We keep this apartment. Nothing changes. And if you win? If I win, things get better. I get to use my brain again. I get to build things. We get to stop worrying about money so much. Emma hugged him. Then I hope you win. But I'll love you either way, even if you're just wearing your regular clothes. Lucas held his daughter and felt something crack open in his chest. This was what mattered. Not Adrian, not the board, not revenge or justice or proving he'd been right all along. This. He got Emma to the bus stop and watched her wave from the window, just like every other morning. Then he caught his own bus downtown, riding past his usual stop where he'd get off for the night shift, continuing into the financial district where he hadn't belonged for 6 years. The Apex Dynamics building looked different in daylight. Busier? Fuller. People in expensive suits rushing through the lobby, all of them looking important and purposeful and like they knew exactly where they belonged. Lucas walked past the security desk where he usually picked up his maintenance uniform and headed straight for the executive elevators. The guard who'd checked his visitor badge Wednesday night did a double take. Sir, I need to see your... Lucas held up the key card Victoria had given him. Level 4 access. The guard's expression shifted from suspicious to surprised to respectfully neutral in about 2 seconds. Have a good day, sir. Sir. Not buddy or chief or the casual dismissiveness reserved for people who cleaned up other people's messes. The executive floor was already buzzing with activity. Lucas could see Victoria through her office window, talking on the phone while reviewing documents on 3 different screens. She saw him and gestured for him to wait. 5 minutes later, she emerged looking like someone who'd either slept perfectly or hadn't slept at all. With Victoria, it was hard to tell. You're early, she said. Couldn't sleep. Neither could I. Board meeting starts in 45 minutes. I need you to review the presentation one more time, make sure we didn't miss anything. They went through it in her office, slide by slide, argument by argument. The evidence was solid, the timeline was clear. The architectural analysis proved beyond reasonable doubt that Lucas had designed the core Helix protocol. But evidence only mattered if people were willing to see it. At 8:45, Victoria's assistant knocked. Ms. Hale, the board is assembling. Mr. Mercer and his attorney just arrived. Lucas felt his stomach drop. Victoria must have seen it on his face because she said, Breathe. You know your work. He doesn't. That's all that matters. What if he's convincing? What if they believe him instead of me? Then we lose. But we don't lose because you weren't good enough. We lose because the system is broken. Either way, you'll know you fought back. That counts for something. They walked to the boardroom together, Victoria in her CEO armor and Lucas in his too loose suit, and with each step, Lucas felt more like he was walking toward an execution than a meeting. The boardroom was everything he'd imagined. Massive table, leather chairs, windows overlooking the city, the kind of room where careers were made and destroyed before lunch. 12 board members were already seated, along with Victoria's executive team and the company's general counsel. And at the far end of the table, looking exactly like Lucas remembered, except more expensive, sat Adrian Mercer. Their eyes met across the room, and Lucas saw the moment Adrian recognized him. Saw the shock, then the calculation, then something that looked almost like fear before Adrian's expression smoothed into professional neutrality. Adrian's lawyer, Richard Kasdan, leaned over and whispered something. Adrian nodded, never breaking eye contact with Lucas. Victoria gestured for Lucas to sit beside her at the head of the table. As he sat down, he could feel everyone's eyes on him, could practically hear them thinking, who's this guy in the cheap suit sitting next to the CEO? The board chair, a silver-haired woman named Margaret Chen, called the meeting to order. We're here to address serious allegations regarding the development of Project Helix and the conduct of our Chief Technology Officer, Adrian Mercer. She looked at Victoria. Ms. Hale, you called this meeting. The floor is yours. Victoria stood, calm and commanding, every inch the CEO who'd built her reputation on being unshakable. Thank you, Margaret. Members of the board, I've asked you here because I've discovered evidence of intellectual property theft that goes to the heart of this company's most valuable asset. She pressed a button, and the screens around the room lit up with the first slide. Project Helix, which we've invested over $60 million in developing, was not created by Adrian Mercer. It was created by the man sitting beside me, Lucas Bennett. The room erupted. Board members talking over each other, Adrian's lawyer objecting, someone demanding to know who Lucas even was. Margaret Chen had to call for order twice before the noise died down. Adrian stood up, his voice smooth and reasonable. This is absurd. Lucas Bennett was a junior developer I employed briefly 6 years ago. He did some preliminary work under my direction, but the Helix protocol is my intellectual property. I have patents, documentation, everything needed to prove ownership. Patents you filed, Victoria said coldly, using architecture Lucas designed. Documentation you created after the fact. And as for ownership, she advanced to the next slide. This is the original development repository for Project Helix. Note the timestamps. Note the commit history. Note that 93% of the core code was written by one person. The screen showed months of development work, thousands of lines of code, all attributed to a user account that predated Adrian's involvement. That account, Victoria continued, belongs to Lucas Bennett. Adrian's contributions during the same period were minimal. Code reviews, optimization suggestions, business documentation. Important work, certainly, But not architecture, not design, not the innovation he's claimed credit for. Adrian's smile never wavered. That repository was a shared resource. Lucas was doing work I'd assigned him. The ideas were mine. The implementation was his. That's how collaboration works. Is it? Victoria pulled up another slide. Because these are emails from the development period, Lucas explaining fundamental concepts to you. Lucas walking you through the architecture you supposedly designed. Lucas correcting your misunderstandings about how the neural pathways integrate with the processing layers. She read from one of the emails, Lucas's words from 6 years ago. Adrian, I don't think you're seeing how the adaptive algorithms need to work. You keep trying to force linear optimization, but this isn't a linear system. It's organic. It has to learn its own pathways. Let me show you what I mean. That proves nothing, Adrian said. Technical partners communicate. That doesn't mean... It proves, Victoria interrupted, her voice sharp as broken glass, that Lucas understood this technology in ways you never did. Which is why Project Helix has been failing for 9 weeks. Because when you tried to scale it without Lucas's expertise, you couldn't. You've been hemorrhaging money and credibility while your team tried desperately to fix problems they didn't understand. Adrian's lawyer stood up. Ms. Hale, these accusations are documented, Victoria said. Everything I'm telling you is supported by evidence. Server logs, email records, code repositories, architectural analysis. Lucas Bennett created the Helix protocol. Adrian Mercer stole it. The room went silent. Margaret Chen looked from Victoria to Adrian to Lucas, who hadn't said a word yet. Mr. Bennett, she said, you've been very quiet. Do you have anything to say? Lucas stood up slowly, his heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. Every eye in the room was on him. Adrian was watching with that slight smile, the one that said, go ahead, try to convince them, see how that works out for you. And Lucas realized he had 2 choices. He could be careful, measured, stick to the facts and hope the evidence spoke for itself, or he could tell the truth in a way that couldn't be ignored. 6 years ago, Lucas said, his voice rough but steady, I was 26 years old and convinced that good work was enough. That if you built something brilliant, people would recognize it and reward you. I was wrong. He looked at Adrian directly. I trusted you. We were partners, friends. I showed you everything I was working on because I thought we were building something together. And you used that trust to destroy me. Lucas, Adrian started, but Lucas kept talking. You stole my architecture, filed patents in your name, and when I confronted you, you didn't just take credit for my work. You made sure I could never work in this industry again. You told people I was unstable, difficult, unreliable. You buried me so completely that the only job I could get was cleaning floors. Lucas gestured around the room. These floors. Your floors. For 4 years, I've been emptying your trash while you built a career on my work. And you know what's funny? You still couldn't make it work properly because you never understood it. You just memorized enough to sound convincing. Adrian stood up, his face flushed. This is character assassination. Lucas is bitter because he couldn't handle the pressure of professional development. He had a breakdown, and now he's trying to rewrite history. I fixed your broken system in less than 4 hours, Lucas said quietly. The room went silent again. Wednesday night, your 9-week failure. I fixed it while wearing a janitor's uniform because that's all I've been allowed to be for the past 6 years. He turned to address the board directly. I can prove everything. The architectural signatures in the code, the development timeline, the fact that I understand this system in ways Adrian never has and never will. But more than that, I can show you exactly how the Helix protocol works, and you'll see that nobody who didn't design it from the ground up could explain it the way I can. Margaret Chen leaned forward. Then explain it, Mr. Bennett. Right now. Show us you know what you claim to know. And Lucas did. He walked them through the architecture, explaining the cascade integration theory, the organic neural pathway development, the adaptive processing distribution that made Helix revolutionary. He drew diagrams on the whiteboard, fielded technical questions from board members who actually understood development, and spoke with the fluency of someone who'd lived inside this technology for years. Adrian tried to interrupt twice. Both times, Lucas caught him in technical errors that proved he didn't understand the fundamentals. When Lucas finished, the room was quiet. Then one of the board members, an older man with sharp eyes and an MIT class ring, said, Adrian, Explain the cascade integration failure that's been causing the 9-week delay. Adrian hesitated just for a second, but it was enough. The team has identified several optimization issues. That's not what I asked. I asked about the cascade integration failure specifically, the technical cause. Adrian looked at his lawyer, then back at the board member. The processing distribution algorithm was encountering bottlenecks due to improper load balancing across the neural pathway formation matrix. It sounded impressive. It was also complete bullshit, a string of technical terms that didn't actually mean anything together. Lucas couldn't help himself. There is no neural pathway formation matrix. That's not how the architecture works. Adrian's face went red. I misspoke. Obviously, you meant you don't know, the MIT board member said, because if you designed this system, you wouldn't need to improvise jargon. Margaret Chen looked at Victoria. What are you recommending? Immediate termination for cause. Breach of employment contract, specifically the intellectual property warranty in Section 12, subsection 4. Full clawback of signing bonus and stock options. And a formal investigation into potential criminal fraud. Adrian's lawyer started objecting, throwing around threats of wrongful termination suits and defamation claims. But Lucas could see the calculation happening on Adrian's face. The recognition that he was losing, that the room believed Lucas over him. The board went into private session for 20 minutes. Lucas waited outside with Victoria, his hands shaking from adrenaline. You did good in there, Victoria said. I called him a liar in front of 12 witnesses. You called him exactly what he is. There's a difference. When the board called them back in, Margaret Chen's expression was neutral. The board has voted to terminate Adrian Mercer's employment effective immediately, pending a full investigation of the circumstances surrounding Project Helix's development. Mr. Mercer, you'll need to surrender your access credentials and company property before leaving the building. Adrian stood there, his face blank with shock. Then he looked at Lucas, and for just a moment Lucas saw real hatred in his eyes. You'll regret this, Adrian said quietly. I have friends, resources. You think you've won, but all you've done is make yourself a target. You already made me a target, Lucas said. 6 years ago. This is just me finally hitting back. Security escorted Adrian out. His lawyer left, making threats that nobody seemed particularly worried about. And then it was just Lucas and Victoria and the board and the weight of what had just happened. Margaret Chen turned to Lucas. Mr. Bennett, the board would like to offer you a formal position as Senior Technical Architect, reporting directly to Ms. Hale. Salary commensurate with your expertise, full benefits, and equity compensation. Additionally, we'll be conducting a review of the Helix protocol patents to ensure proper attribution going forward. Lucas stared at her. You're offering me a job. We're offering you the job you should have had 6 years ago, if you want it. Lucas thought about Emma, about the apartment with the leaky faucet, about 4 years of being invisible. Yes, he said. I want it. The board meeting ended, and Victoria walked Lucas back to her office in silence. When they got there, she closed the door and leaned against it. We did it, she said. Yeah, we did. Lucas sat down heavily. Why don't I feel better? Because revenge doesn't feel like the movies say it should. It just feels like work. Victoria smiled slightly. Give it time. Tomorrow you'll wake up and remember you don't have to clean floors anymore. That might feel better. Lucas laughed, but it came out shaky. He'd won. Adrian was gone. The truth was out. So why did he feel like he'd just survived a car crash? What happens now? He asked. Now you prove the board made the right choice. You run the Helix demo at 9:30, show the engineering team what you can do, and start rebuilding what Adrian broke. Victoria paused. And Lucas? You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be honest. That's more than Adrian ever was. At 9:30, Lucas stood in front of 40 engineers and showed them the Helix protocol running clean. He explained the fixes he'd made, answered their questions, and watched skepticism turn to grudging respect turn to genuine interest. One of the senior developers, a woman named Rita, who'd apparently been fighting with the broken system for weeks, came up to him afterward. That cascade integration fix, she said. I tried something similar 3 weeks ago, but I couldn't get it stable. You were close, Lucas said, pulling up her old code on his tablet. You just needed to adjust the priority sequencing in the authentication layer, see? Here. Rita looked at the screen, then at Lucas. How long did it take you to see that? About 5 seconds, but I designed the authentication layer so I know where the conflicts would emerge. Adrian always said the authentication layer was modular and shouldn't affect core processing. Adrian was wrong about a lot of things. Word spread fast in a tech company. By lunch, everyone knew that the janitor who'd fixed Project Helix in one night was actually the architect who designed it in the first place. By mid-afternoon, Lucas had 3 engineers asking if he'd review their code. By evening, Victoria's assistant had scheduled 14 meetings for the following week with various team leads who wanted Lucas's input on their projects. Lucas sat in his new office, his actual office, with his name on the door, and tried to process what had just happened to his life. His phone rang. Emma's school. His heart stopped. Hello? Mr. Bennett, this is Principal Morrison. Everything's fine, but Emma got into a small altercation during lunch. Could you come pick her up? Lucas was out the door in seconds. He found Emma sitting in the principal's office looking defiant and slightly bruised. A boy about her age sat across from her holding an ice pack to his nose. What happened? Lucas asked. Principal Morrison sighed. Tommy Briggs told Emma that janitors were stupid. Emma disagreed, physically. Lucas looked at his daughter. You hit Tommy Briggs? He said you were stupid because you clean floors. I told him you're actually really smart and you just got a new job. He said I was lying, so I proved I wasn't lying by showing him I could fight. That's not how proof works, Em. It worked for you. You fought back today and won. I just did the same thing. Lucas didn't know whether to be proud or horrified. He settled for both. Principal Morrison sent them home with a warning about appropriate conflict resolution. Lucas walked Emma to the bus stop, trying to figure out what to say. I'm not mad, he said finally. But fighting's not the answer. It was today. Today was different. Why? Because you're a grown-up and I'm a kid? Because I used words and evidence, not fists. You used words and evidence for 6 years and nothing happened. Then you fought back for real and everything changed. Emma looked at him. Maybe sometimes you have to fight. Not with hitting, but like really fight. Not just accept bad things. Lucas realized his 8-year-old daughter had just summarized the last 6 years of his life better than he ever could. You're grounded, he said, but you're not wrong. They got home to find Mrs. Chen waiting with a casserole and a knowing look. I heard, she said. The whole building's talking about how you took down some big executive. Tommy Briggs's mother called me very upset about Emma. I told her Tommy earned what he got. Lucas started laughing. He couldn't help it. The whole absurd day, the board meeting, the demo, his daughter punching a kid for calling him stupid, all of it hit him at once, and he laughed until tears ran down his face. Emma and Mrs. Chen watched him like he'd lost his mind. Are you okay? Emma asked. Yeah, baby. For the first time in 6 years, I think I actually am. That night, after Emma was asleep and Mrs. Chen had gone home, Lucas stood at his apartment window looking out at the city. Tomorrow he'd start his new job. Tomorrow he'd walk into Apex Dynamics as senior technical architect instead of the invisible janitor. Tomorrow, everything would be different. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. The board approved your patent review. Your name will be on the Helix protocol within 6 weeks. Also, HR needs you to fill out new hire paperwork. Congratulations, Lucas. You earned this. Lucas read the text 3 times, letting it sink in. He'd earned this. Not by being perfect. Not by playing politics or manipulating people or destroying anyone who got in his way. By being good at what he did and finally refusing to be invisible anymore. Lucas looked at the text one more time, then typed back. Thank you. For believing me when nobody else would. Victoria's response came immediately. I didn't believe you. I verified you. There's a difference. See you Monday. Lucas smiled and put his phone down. Monday. His first day as someone who mattered again. He could hardly wait. Monday morning felt surreal. Lucas stood in front of his bathroom mirror wearing clothes he'd bought over the weekend. Actual professional clothes that fit, courtesy of Victoria's HR department, advancing him enough salary to look the part. The guy staring back at him looked almost like the person he used to be before everything fell apart. Almost. There were differences. Lines around his eyes that hadn't been there at 26, gray creeping into his hair at the temples, a wariness in his expression that came from being crushed and learning that the world didn't care. Emma appeared in the doorway, already dressed for school. "You look nervous," she said. "I am nervous." "Why? You already proved you're good at this. Proving it once is different from doing it every day. What if I can't keep up? What if I've been out of it too long and everyone realizes I don't belong there anymore?" Emma crossed her arms and gave him that look, the one that was pure 8-year-old judgment. "Daddy, you fixed something in 3 hours that a whole team couldn't fix in 9 weeks. Stop being scared. When did you get so bossy?" "I learned from watching you be scared of everything for 4 years. Somebody had to be brave." That hit harder than Lucas expected. He knelt down so he was at her eye level. "You're right, I was scared. I've been scared for a long time, but I'm trying not to be anymore." "Good, because I like this version of you better. You smile more." Lucas hugged her, blinking back the sudden burn in his eyes. "How'd I get so lucky to have you?" "You didn't get lucky. You just didn't give up on me even when everything sucked." They walked to the bus stop together, and Lucas watched Emma climb aboard with her backpack and her stubborn chin and her complete confidence that he was going to be fine. He wished he had half her certainty. The bus ride to Apex Dynamics felt different in daylight, wearing a suit instead of his maintenance uniform. People looked at him like he was one of them now, instead of invisible. A woman offered him the seat next to her. A guy in an expensive watch asked if he worked in the financial district. Lucas said yes, and it felt like speaking a foreign language he'd forgotten how to use. He walked into the Apex building at 8:30 and headed for the executive elevators. The same security guard from Friday morning nodded at him. "Welcome back, Mr. Bennett." Mr. Bennett. Not sir with that edge of uncertainty. Just his name, like he belonged there. Lucas rode up to the 34th floor and stepped out into organized chaos. Engineers everywhere, talking in clusters, reviewing code on tablets, arguing about optimization strategies. The energy was different from the funeral atmosphere he'd sensed when the Helix protocol was failing. This felt alive. Rita spotted him first. "Lucas, thank God. I've been trying to implement your authentication fix on the beta environment, and I'm getting weird latency spikes. Can you look at it?" "Sure, just let me—" "Also," another engineer interrupted, "the Cascade integration is throwing warnings in the staging logs, nothing critical, but it feels wrong. You got a minute?" "After Rita, yeah, I can—" Bennett, a tall guy with a Northwestern hoodie, pushed through the crowd. "Mike Chen, infrastructure lead. We need to talk about scaling the Helix architecture for the enterprise deployment. Victoria said you're the guy." Lucas looked at the three of them, then at the half-dozen other engineers hovering nearby with that look that said they also needed his time, and felt panic rising in his chest. This was too much. He'd been cleaning floors a week ago. He couldn't just jump into being the person everyone relied on for answers. Then Victoria's voice cut through the noise. "Everyone step back. Lucas just walked in the door. Give him 10 minutes to breathe before you drown him in technical debt." The engineers dispersed, though Rita lingered long enough to say, "Seriously though, when you get a chance, those latency spikes are making me crazy." "I'll look at them," Lucas promised. Victoria gestured for him to follow her into her office. She closed the door and the noise cut off abruptly. "Welcome to being indispensable," she said. "How are you holding up?" "I've been here 5 minutes and I already have 3 fires to put out." That's what happens when you're the only person who actually understands the architecture. You become the bottleneck. Victoria pulled up something on her tablet. "Which is why I'm assigning you a team, 4 engineers handpicked, smart enough to learn from you and distribute the workload. You're not doing this alone." "I don't know how to manage people." "Then learn. You've got bigger problems to solve than hand-holding junior developers, but you can't solve them if you're spending 12 hours a day fixing everyone else's implementation mistakes." She had a point. Lucas looked at the names on the screen. Rita Chen, who he already liked. Mike Chen. No relation, apparently. A guy named David Park, who specialized in neural network optimization. And someone named Sarah Okonkwo, whose background was in distributed systems architecture. "These are good people?" Lucas asked. "They're the best people who aren't too senior to take direction from someone who just got here. Rita's brilliant, but impatient. Mike knows infrastructure backward and forward, but gets tunnel vision. David's a perfectionist who needs someone to tell him when good enough is good enough. Sarah's smarter than all of them, but has imposter syndrome so bad she second-guesses everything. So they're all broken in different ways. They're all human, same as you." Victoria smiled slightly. Your job isn't to fix them, it's to help them be better at what they already do well. Lucas spent the morning in meetings with his new team, with Victoria's executive staff, with HR about benefits and equity packages that included numbers he had to read 3 times to believe. By lunch, his head was spinning and he'd answered approximately 400 technical questions and agreed to review 6 different code implementations. He ate a sandwich at his desk while going through Rita's latency problem. The issue was obvious once he looked at the logs. She'd implemented his authentication fix correctly, but the beta environment was running an older version of the processing kernel that didn't support the new integration hooks. Easy fix. He sent her the solution with notes on how to verify it worked. Rita responded 30 seconds later. "You're a wizard. Seriously, where have you been for the last 4 years?" Lucas stared at that message for a long moment before typing back. "Cleaning your office, actually." Rita's response was a string of profanity followed by, "I'm so sorry, that's messed up." "Yeah, but I'm here now. Damn right you are. Drinks Friday? Team bonding or whatever?" Lucas hesitated, then typed, "Maybe. Ask me Thursday." He wasn't ready for the social part yet, the pretending to be normal part. Right now he just needed to survive the technical challenges without proving he didn't belong here. The afternoon brought new problems. The enterprise deployment Mike had mentioned required scaling the Helix protocol to handle 10 times the current load. Lucas spent 2 hours whiteboarding the architecture changes they'd need, explaining to Mike and Sarah why simply adding more servers wouldn't work. "The neural pathways have to form organically," Lucas said, drawing connection patterns on the board. "If you force parallel processing before the system establishes stable learning patterns, you fragment the intelligence across too many nodes, and it can't integrate properly." Sarah frowned at the diagram. "But the original spec shows distributed processing across unlimited nodes." The original spec was theoretical. In practice, there's an optimal range based on network latency and processing coherence. You can scale wide, but you have to do it in stages, letting the system adapt to each new node cluster before adding more. "How do you know that?" Mike asked. "Did you test it during initial development?" "No. I know it because I understand how the learning algorithms work at a fundamental level. I designed them to mimic organic neural development. You can't rush evolution." Sarah was taking notes frantically. "So we need to build in staging gates, progressive deployment with adaptation periods between expansions." "Exactly. Start with your core cluster, let it stabilize for 72 hours, then add the next tier. Monitor the pathway formation metrics. I'll show you which ones matter, and only proceed when you see coherent integration." Mike looked at the whiteboard like Lucas had just solved world hunger. "This is going to add 3 weeks to the deployment timeline. It's going to add 3 weeks of doing it right instead of 6 months of fixing it when it breaks." Lucas capped the marker. "Your choice." Mike and Sarah exchanged glances, then Mike said, "We do it your way. I'll update the project timeline." After they left, Lucas sat at his desk and let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. He just made a decision that would affect a multi-million-dollar deployment, and people had listened to him, trusted his judgment. It felt terrifying and right in equal measure. Victoria stopped by his office at 5:30. "You survived day 1, she said. "Barely. Is it always like this?" "The first week's the worst. Everyone wants a piece of you because you're new and you fix the unfixable. It'll calm down once they realize you're not leaving and they don't have to hoard your attention." Lucas rubbed his eyes. "I have 14 requests for code reviews and 9 meetings scheduled for tomorrow, and Rita keeps sending me questions about optimization strategies. Tell Rita to slow down. She gets excited about new challenges and forgets other people need sleep." I kind of like that about her. She reminds me of me back when I still had energy. Victoria leaned against the doorframe. "You're doing good work, Lucas. Better than I expected, honestly. The team's responding to you. They're responding to someone who knows the answers. I don't know what happens when I run into a problem I can't solve." "Then you figure it out, same as everyone else. You're not expected to be perfect, just competent and honest." She paused. "Adrian was neither of those things, and he lasted 3 years. You're already doing better." Lucas wasn't sure he believed that, but he appreciated her saying it. He left the office at 6 and took the bus home, exhausted in a way he hadn't been since the early days of building the Helix protocol the first time. But it was good exhaustion, the kind that came from using his brain for what it was built to do, instead of just getting through another shift. Emma was waiting for him with Mrs. Chen and a plate of cookies. "How was work?" Emma asked. "Intense. Overwhelming. Kind of amazing." "Did anyone figure out you don't know what you're doing?" Lucas laughed. "Not yet, but give them time." "You totally know what you're doing, Daddy. Stop pretending you don't." Mrs. Chen smiled and headed for the door. "She's right, you know. Confidence is just competence that stopped apologizing for itself." Lucas thought about that while Emma did her homework, and he reviewed code submissions on his laptop. Competence that stopped apologizing. Maybe that's all this was. Maybe he'd spent so long being invisible that he'd forgotten he was actually good at this. The week accelerated. Tuesday brought a crisis when the staging environment crashed during load testing. Lucas spent 4 hours debugging with David and discovered someone had deployed a patch that conflicted with the core processing kernel. Wednesday, Sarah found an edge case in the neural pathway formation that could cause cascade failures under specific network conditions. Lucas had to redesign part of the integration layer on the fly. Thursday, Victoria called an all-hands meeting to announce that Project Helix had passed certification testing and would launch to enterprise clients the following month. The engineering team erupted in applause. Lucas stood in the back of the room watching people celebrate something he'd built, something that had been broken and was now working, and felt a complicated mix of pride and imposter syndrome. Rita found him after the meeting. "So, Friday drinks. You're coming, right? The team wants to buy you a beer for not letting us completely screw up your architecture." Lucas hesitated. The old instinct was to say no, to keep his distance, to not let people get close enough to see how broken he still was underneath the professional exterior. Then he thought about Emma telling him to stop being scared. "Yeah," he said, "I'll come." Friday afternoon, the team gathered at a bar 3 blocks from Apex Dynamics. Lucas nursed a beer while Rita told increasingly absurd stories about the 9 weeks of Helix failures. Mike argued with David about optimal server configurations, and Sarah quietly observed everyone with that analytical expression that reminded Lucas of himself. "You're not much of a talker, are you?" Sarah said. "I'm out of practice. Spent the last 4 years mostly alone." "Rita said you were working as a janitor, that true?" "Yeah." "And before that you were what, building revolutionary AI systems?" "Something like that." Sarah took a sip of her drink. "Must be weird, going from invisible to indispensable in 1 week." "Weird doesn't cover it. I keep waiting for someone to figure out I don't belong here." "Imposter syndrome's a hell of a drug," Sarah said. "I've got 3 degrees and 5 years experience, and I still think they're going to realize they hired the wrong person. But you actually built the thing we're all trying to make work. You've got less reason to feel like an imposter than anyone here." Knowledge and feelings don't always line up. No, they don't. Sarah looked at him thoughtfully. "Rita says you're patient when we ask stupid questions. That's rare. Most senior architects get annoyed when you don't immediately understand their vision. I remember being the person asking stupid questions. And they're not stupid anyway. They're just based on different assumptions than mine. See, that's what I mean. You actually think about how other people think. Adrian never did that. He'd explain something once, get irritated if you didn't get it, and then blame you for being slow." Lucas had heard variations of this all week, little comments from engineers about how different he was from Adrian, how much easier it was to work with him, how the whole department felt lighter now. It should have felt good. Mostly it just felt like pressure, like he had to maintain this version of himself that people were responding to. And if he slipped back into being scared or uncertain or broken, he'd disappoint everyone. Mike came over with another round of drinks. "I'm going to say something, and you're going to think I'm kissing ass, but I mean it." He was slightly drunk, his words careful in that way drunk people got when they were trying to be serious. "You saved this project. Not just technically, like morale-wise. We were all ready to quit. Helix was a disaster. Adrian kept blaming us for his shitty architecture decisions. And management kept throwing money at a problem that wasn't about money. Then you show up," Rita added, joining the conversation. "And in 1 night, you fix what we couldn't fix in 2 months. That's not just skill. That's knowing what you built well enough to see what's wrong instantly. That's craft." David raised his glass. "To Lucas, for being better than the guy who stole his work." They all drank to that, and Lucas felt something crack open in his chest. These people barely knew him, but they'd accepted him based on nothing more than his ability to solve their problems and treat them with respect. Maybe that was enough. Maybe he didn't need to be perfect or healed or completely over what Adrian had done to him. Maybe he just needed to be useful and decent and willing to show up. Lucas got home late, slightly buzzed for the first time in years, and found Emma asleep on the couch with a book on her chest. Mrs. Chen was watching television with the volume low. "Good night?" she asked. "Yeah, surprisingly good. You smell like beer and happiness. It's a good look on you." Lucas laughed and paid her for watching Emma, adding an extra 20 because his first real paycheck had hit that morning and he could finally afford to be generous. After Mrs. Chen left, Lucas stood in his apartment looking at the space that had been his entire world for 4 years. The water-stained ceiling, the window that didn't quite close all the way, the couch that was his bed and Emma's reading spot, and the place they ate dinner because the kitchen table was too small. He could afford better now. A real apartment with separate bedrooms. Maybe even a house if he saved carefully. But standing there in the dim light with his sleeping daughter, and the smell of Mrs. Chen's cooking still lingering in the air, Lucas realized this place had kept them safe when nothing else would. It deserved better than just being abandoned the second he had other options. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Board meeting Tuesday. They want an update on Helix deployment timeline and enterprise rollout strategy. You're presenting. Prepare accordingly." Lucas stared at the message, then typed back, "You're really not going to ease me into this, are you? You fix the system, you lead the deployment. That's how this works. Besides, you already proved you can handle a boardroom. This time, they're on your side." Lucas wasn't sure that made it less terrifying, but he appreciated the vote of confidence. He spent the weekend preparing the presentation, explaining the architecture to Emma as a way of organizing his thoughts. She listened with that serious expression, asking questions that were surprisingly insightful for an 8-year-old. "So the computer learns like a brain?" she asked. "Kind of. It forms connections based on patterns it sees, and those connections get stronger when they're useful and weaker when they're not. Like how I got better at math by practicing. Exactly like that." "But you can't make it learn faster by just telling it the answers?" "No. It has to discover the patterns itself. That's what makes it intelligent instead of just programmed." Emma thought about that. That's why Adrian couldn't fix it. He was trying to tell it the answers instead of letting it learn. Lucas stopped mid-keystroke and looked at his daughter. "Yeah, that's exactly why. How'd you figure that out?" "Because that's what bad teachers do. They tell you what to think instead of teaching you how to think. And it never works because you just memorize stuff instead of understanding it. You're scary smart, you know that?" "I know. I get it from you." Tuesday came faster than Lucas wanted. He walked into the boardroom wearing his new suit and carrying a presentation he'd revised 17 times. The same board members who'd watched him expose Adrian were watching him now, but the energy was different, less hostile, more curious. Margaret Chen gestured for him to begin. Lucas pulled up his first slide and started talking. He walked them through the deployment timeline, explained the stage scaling approach and why it was necessary, outlined the enterprise integration requirements and how they'd met them. He fielded questions about processing capacity, security protocols, client customization options. And somewhere in the middle of explaining why the neural pathway formation needed organic development time, Lucas realized he wasn't scared anymore. This was just work. Hard work, important work, but work he knew how to do. When he finished, Margaret Chen nodded slowly. "This is significantly more detailed than anything Adrian ever presented. You clearly understand not just the technology, but the implementation challenges." "I've been living inside this architecture for 6 years, Lucas said. "I know where it breaks and how to prevent that." One of the board members, the MIT guy who'd caught Adrian in his lie, leaned forward. "Question about the intellectual property. The patent review, where does that stand?" Victoria answered, "Legal is finalizing the corrections now. Lucas will be listed as primary inventor on all core Helix protocol patents. Adrian's name will be removed. The paperwork should be complete within 2 weeks." "And Adrian's accepted this?" "Adrian doesn't have a choice. The evidence is clear. His lawyer stopped threatening litigation, which tells me they know they'd lose." The board member smiled. "Good. I hate rewarding thieves. The meeting ended with approval for the deployment timeline and a budget increase for Lucas's team. As everyone filed out, Margaret Chen stopped Lucas. "I owe you an apology," she said. Lucas blinked. "For what?" "For not questioning Adrian's credentials more carefully when we hired him. For letting this go on for 3 years before someone bothered to verify his claims. You should have been working here all along, not cleaning our floors." "You didn't know." "That's not an excuse. Part of our job is knowing. We failed you." She held out her hand. "We won't make that mistake again." Lucas shook her hand, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "Thank you." He walked back to his office feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The patents would have his name. The board supported him. His team was functional and learning fast. Things were actually working. Rita was waiting at his desk with a laptop and a problem. "Okay, so don't freak out, but we've got a situation with the client beta deployment. The neural pathways are forming wrong on their hardware configuration, and I don't know why." Lucas looked at the error logs and felt the familiar rush of problem-solving kick in. "Show me their system specs." They spent the next 3 hours debugging, finally discovering that the client's security protocols were interfering with the pathway formation timing. Lucas wrote a patch that adjusted the integration sequence to account for the delay. "You're a lifesaver," Rita said. "How did you see that so fast?" "Because I've seen every possible way this system can break. I built in failure modes during the original development, so I'd know how to fix them later." "That's kind of genius." "That's just paranoia with good documentation." Rita laughed and headed back to her desk. Lucas watched her go, then turned back to his monitor where 17 new emails waited, along with 5 meeting requests and a Slack message from David asking about optimization strategies for the next deployment phase. This was his life now. Problem after problem, question after question, people depending on him to have answers. And for the first time in 6 years, Lucas didn't feel crushed by the weight of it. He felt useful. That night, Emma asked if they could start looking at new apartments. "Why?" Lucas asked. "You don't like it here?" "I like it fine. But you have a real job now, and Mrs. Chen says we can afford better. I want my own room, and a kitchen table that fits more than 2 chairs." Lucas looked at his daughter, who'd never complained about the cramped apartment, or the hand-me-down furniture, or the fact that her father slept on the couch. Who'd just accepted that this was their life and made the best of it. "Okay," he said. "We'll start looking this weekend." Emma grinned and hugged him. "Can we get a place with a bathtub, not just a shower?" "Yeah, we can do that." "And can my room have a door that closes all the way?" "Emma, your room will have whatever you want, within reason." "What's within reason?" "No pet tigers, no indoor swimming pools, no helicopter landing pads." "You're no fun." But she was smiling, and Lucas realized this was what winning actually looked like. Not the boardroom victory or the patents or the fancy job title. This. His daughter asking for a bathtub and a door that closed properly because she finally believed those things were possible. That was worth more than everything else combined. Lucas's phone rang. "Victoria. I need you in the office early tomorrow, 6 a.m. We've got a situation with the Tokyo deployment and the client wants to talk to the lead architect directly." "That's 5 p.m. their time. Are they working late just to talk to me?" "They're working late because they're paying us $8 million, and they want to make sure the person who built this thing knows what he's doing. Show them you do. No pressure." "You've handled worse. 6 a.m., conference room 3. Don't be late." She hung up, and Lucas looked at the time. 8 p.m. He needed to review the Tokyo deployment specs, prepare talking points, and get at least some sleep before the morning call. Emma was reading on the couch. "I have to work early tomorrow," Lucas said. "Really early. Mrs. Chen's going to get you to school. Is it important work?" $8 million important. Emma's eyes went wide. "Wow, you must be really good at your job." "I'm trying to be." "You are. You just don't believe it yet." Lucas looked at his 8-year-old daughter, who somehow understood him better than he understood himself, and thought, not for the first time, that he didn't deserve her. But he had her anyway, and he was going to make damn sure she never had to wonder if they could afford a bathtub again. The Tokyo call went better than Lucas expected. He explained the Helix architecture in detail, walked their technical team through the deployment specifications, and answered questions about scalability and integration protocols with the kind of confidence that came from actually knowing what he was talking about. By the time the call ended at 7:30 a.m., the client had approved the implementation timeline and requested Lucas personally oversee their launch. Victoria caught him in the hallway afterward. They loved you. The CEO told me you were the most technically competent architect they'd worked with in 15 years. I just answered their questions. You did more than that. You made them feel confident in an $8 million investment. That's worth more than technical skill. She paused. How would you feel about traveling to Tokyo for the launch? 2 weeks, all expenses paid, chance to see the system go live in a major international deployment. Lucas thought about Emma, about 2 weeks away from her, about Mrs. Chen having to cover full-time instead of just evenings. I don't know if I can leave Emma that long. Bring her with you. Company will cover her flight and accommodation. She'll miss 2 weeks of school, but Tokyo's educational. Call it a field trip. Lucas stared at Victoria. You're serious? Why wouldn't I be? Your daughter's 8, not 18. She needs supervision while you're working 16-hour days making sure our biggest client doesn't implode. Bring her along, hire a local sitter for work hours, spend evenings exploring the city together. Win-win. I've never taken her anywhere. We've never even left the state. Then this will be her first international trip. Better than Disneyland. Victoria smiled. Think about it, but don't think too long. Launch is in 6 weeks. Lucas spent the morning in a daze trying to focus on code reviews while his brain kept circling back to the idea of taking Emma to Tokyo, to showing her a world bigger than their cramped apartment and the 6 blocks between home and school. Rita noticed him staring at his screen without actually reading anything. You okay? You look like someone just told you won the lottery, but you're not sure it's real. Victoria wants me to go to Tokyo for the client launch and bring Emma. That's amazing. Why do you look terrified? Because what if something goes wrong? What if I screw up the deployment and waste their money? What if Emma gets sick or I can't find childcare or Lucas? Rita leaned against his desk. You're doing the thing again. The thing where you convince yourself you're going to fail before you even try. Stop it. I'm just being realistic. No, you're being scared. There's a difference. She pulled up a chair. Can I tell you something? When Adrian was running this project, we all knew it was failing. But nobody wanted to admit it because Adrian had this way of making you feel stupid for questioning him. So we just kept quiet and watched it burn. I don't see what that has to... My point is, you're the opposite of that. You explain things. You admit when you don't know something. You treat us like we're smart enough to understand complex problems. That's why this team works now, not because you're perfect, but because you're honest. Lucas looked at Rita and saw the sincerity in her face. I'm still figuring this out, all of it. How to manage people, how to handle client expectations, how to be the person everyone thinks I am. Nobody expects you to be perfect. We just expect you to keep doing what you've been doing, showing up, knowing your stuff, and treating people like humans instead of problems. Do that in Tokyo, and you'll be fine. She was right, but that didn't make the fear go away. Lucas had spent 4 years in survival mode, and survival mode didn't include international travel or $8 million responsibilities or believing that good things could happen without immediately falling apart. That evening, he told Emma about Tokyo. Her reaction was immediate and explosive. Are you serious? Like actual Japan? With the bullet trains and the temples and the vending machines that sell everything? Yes, actual Japan for 2 weeks. You'd miss school. I don't care about school. This is Tokyo. You'd have to stay with a babysitter while I work during the day. That's fine. Can we go to the Pokemon Center and eat real ramen and see the cherry blossoms? It'll be November. No cherry blossoms. I don't care. I just want to go. Emma grabbed his hands. Please say yes. Please, please, please. Lucas looked at his daughter's face, lit up with excitement he'd never seen before, and realized he'd been so focused on keeping them safe that he'd forgotten to let her experience joy. Okay, he said. We'll go. Emma screamed and hugged him so hard he almost fell over, and Lucas thought about how much had changed in 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago, he'd been invisible, cleaning floors and trying not to hope for anything. Now he was planning international trips and fielding $8 million client calls and watching his daughter believe in possibilities. The next 6 weeks blurred together in a cascade of deployments, client meetings, team management, and preparation. Lucas's team grew from 4 to 7 as the Helix protocol expanded into new markets. Rita became his de facto second-in-command, handling day-to-day implementation while Lucas focused on architecture and client relations. Sarah took over the enterprise scaling project. Mike built out the infrastructure roadmap for the next 2 years. And slowly, Lucas stopped feeling like an imposter and started feeling like someone who belonged. The patent corrections came through in late October. Lucas stared at the documents that listed him as primary inventor on 17 different Helix protocol patents, his name replacing Adrian's in the official record. It should have felt triumphant. Mostly it just felt sad. 6 years of his life erased and rewritten, the theft finally acknowledged, but the time still lost. Victoria found him in his office that afternoon, holding the patent documents. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just thinking about what could have been different if Adrian hadn't stolen this. Where I'd be. Who Emma's mom might have been if things hadn't fallen apart. You can't live in what-ifs, trust me. I've tried. It just makes you crazy." "Do you ever think about your old boss? The one who took credit for your work?" "Sometimes. Usually when I'm signing off on quarterly earnings and remembering he's stuck in middle management making a fraction of what I make." "Petty?" "Yes. Satisfying? Also yes." Victoria sat down across from him. "The thing about getting justice is it doesn't erase what happened. It just gives you permission to stop carrying it around." "I don't know how to stop carrying it. It's been part of me for 6 years." "Then don't try to drop it all at once. Just put it down for a few minutes at a time. Take your daughter to Tokyo. Show her the world. Let yourself be present for something good instead of always looking back at something bad." Lucas thought about that advice over the next 2 weeks as he finalized the Tokyo deployment plans and watched Emma research Japanese culture with an intensity usually reserved for Pokemon strategies. She made lists of places to visit, foods to try, phrases to learn. Mrs. Chen helped her practice basic Japanese greetings and gave her a small notebook to document the trip. "You're going to have adventures," Mrs. Chen told Emma. "Real adventures, not just reading about them in books." The night before they left, Lucas couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about all the things that could go wrong. The deployment failing, Emma getting lost in a foreign country, client dissatisfaction, professional embarrassment. Emma found him on the couch at 2 a.m., staring at his laptop. "You're doing the worry thing again," she said. "I'm just reviewing the deployment checklist." "No, you're panicking. I can tell." Emma sat next to him. "Daddy, what's the worst thing that could happen in Tokyo?" "The system could fail and we'd lose an $8 million client." "Okay, and then what?" "Then I'd probably get fired and we'd be back where we started." "Would we die?" "What? No." "Would we starve?" "No, Emma, we wouldn't starve." "Then it's not actually the worst thing. The worst thing already happened when that guy stole your work and we had to move to the small apartment. We survived that. We can survive anything else." Lucas looked at his 8-year-old daughter and realized she'd somehow become braver than him. She'd watched him get crushed and keep going, and she'd learned that survival was possible even when everything fell apart. "When did you get so wise?" he asked. "I've always been wise. You just notice it more now because you're not sad all the time." They flew out the next morning. Emma pressed her face against the airplane window for the entire 14-hour flight, watching clouds and ocean, and finally the lights of Tokyo appearing below them like a galaxy of possibility. The city was overwhelming in the best way, bright and chaotic and nothing like anywhere Lucas had ever been. Their hotel was in Shibuya, close to the client's headquarters. Emma spent the first evening staring out the window at the famous crossing, watching thousands of people flow across the intersection in synchronized chaos. "It's like watching code execute," Lucas said, standing beside her. "All these individual elements following their own logic but creating a pattern together. That's what your Helix thing does, right? Lots of small parts making something bigger?" "Yeah, exactly like that." The deployment began the next day. Lucas spent 12 hours at the client's headquarters working with their technical team, monitoring the Helix protocol as it integrated with their existing systems. Rita video called in from California to help troubleshoot some network latency issues. Sarah provided real-time analysis of the neural pathway formation. Mike coordinated with their infrastructure team to optimize processing distribution. It wasn't perfect. There were hiccups and small failures and moments of panic when error logs lit up red. But Lucas had built the system to be resilient, and every time something broke, there was a pathway to fix it. By the end of the first week, the deployment was 60% complete and running ahead of schedule. The client was impressed. Their CEO pulled Lucas aside after a status meeting and said, "Adrian told us this system was revolutionary, but he never explained why. You make it understandable. That's valuable." Emma spent her days with a local college student named Yuki, who Victoria's assistant had found through an international childcare service. Yuki took Emma to parks and museums and the Pokemon Center, documenting everything in photos she sent to Lucas throughout the day. Every evening, Lucas would finish work and meet them for dinner, listening to Emma describe her adventures in breathless detail. "We went to a shrine and I learned how to properly wash my hands before praying, and we saw these huge wooden gates called Tori, and Yuki taught me how to make a wish, and I wished for you to be happy." Lucas felt something crack open in his chest. "You wished for me to be happy?" "Yeah, because you're good at your job and people like you, and we're in Tokyo, but sometimes you still look sad. Like you're waiting for something bad to happen." She wasn't wrong. Lucas had been waiting for the other shoe to drop since the moment Victoria had offered him the job. Waiting for someone to realize he didn't belong. Waiting for Adrian to find a way to destroy him again. Waiting for proof that good things were temporary and suffering was permanent. "I'm working on the happy part," Lucas told her. "It's harder than the job part." "Why?" "Because being good at work is about solving problems. Being happy is about believing you deserve good things, and I'm still figuring out how to believe that." Emma thought about this seriously. "Maybe you should make a wish too, at a shrine. Can't hurt." The next day was Saturday. No work, no deployment pressures, just Lucas and Emma exploring Tokyo together. They visited Sensoji Temple in Asakusa, and Lucas stood in front of the shrine watching Emma go through the ritual Yuki had taught her, purifying her hands, bowing twice, clapping twice, bowing once more. When she finished, she looked at him expectantly. "Your turn." Lucas approached the shrine feeling ridiculous. He didn't believe in wishes or prayers or the idea that rituals could change anything material. But Emma was watching him with those serious eyes, and he'd learned that sometimes you did things not because you believed in them, but because the people you loved needed to see you try. He went through the motions, purified his hands, bowed and clapped and bowed again. And standing there in front of the shrine with Tokyo bustling around him and his daughter waiting patiently, Lucas made a wish, not for success or wealth or revenge, just for peace, for the ability to let go of the anger and fear and shame that had been his constant companions for 6 years, for permission to be happy without waiting for it to be taken away. "What did you wish for?" Emma asked. "If I tell you, it won't come true." "That's not how it works. You're thinking of birthday candles." Lucas laughed and took her hand, and they spent the rest of the day being tourists. They ate okonomiyaki and visited the Imperial Palace Gardens and rode the bullet train to Kyoto just because Emma wanted to see how fast it really was. That night, back at the hotel, Lucas got a call from Victoria. "How's Tokyo?" "Good. Deployment's running smooth, clients happy, Emma's having the time of her life." "I heard. Yuki sends me daily reports, and they're basically just Emma being excited about everything. It's adorable." Victoria paused. "I'm calling because something came up. Adrian's filing a lawsuit against you, me, and Apex Dynamics, claiming wrongful termination and defamation." Lucas felt his stomach drop. "Can he do that?" "He can try. His lawyer filed the paperwork yesterday. They're alleging we conspired to destroy his reputation using fabricated evidence. The evidence isn't fabricated. I know. You know. The board knows. But Adrian's betting that a lawsuit will be expensive and embarrassing enough that we'll settle rather than fight. He wants his job back, his reputation restored, and financial compensation for damages." Lucas sat down heavily on the hotel bed. "What do we do?" "We fight. Our legal team is already preparing a countersuit for fraud and intellectual property theft. And Lucas, we're going to win. The evidence is too strong. This is just Adrian being desperate." "It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like he's still controlling my life." "Only if you let him. You're in Tokyo launching an $8 million deployment. He's filing nuisance lawsuits from his lawyer's office. Who's winning?" Victoria had a point, but Lucas still felt the old fear creeping back. The fear that Adrian would always find a way to hurt him. That justice was temporary and powerful people always won eventually. "Don't let him in your head," Victoria said, reading his silence. "That's what he wants. to make you scared and uncertain so you stop being effective. Don't give him that. Lucas promised he'd try, but after he hung up, he sat in the dark hotel room for a long time, listening to Emma sleep in the next bed and thinking about how hard it was to believe in good things when bad things kept finding you. The next morning, Emma noticed his mood immediately. "Something happened," she said. "What is it?" Lucas debated lying, decided against it. Emma deserved honesty. "The guy who stole my work is trying to cause problems again. He's suing us. Can he do that if he's the one who did something wrong?" "Apparently, yes. People can sue for pretty much anything. Whether they win is different." "Are you going to win?" Victoria says yes. She says the evidence is too strong. "Then why do you look worried?" "Because I've been through this before, and last time I lost everything. I'm scared it'll happen again." Emma climbed onto the bed next to him and put her hand on his arm. "Daddy, you're different now. Last time you were alone and nobody believed you. This time you have Victoria and the team and all those patents with your name on them. And you have me. We're not going to let some jerk take this away from you." Lucas looked at his daughter and felt something shift inside him. She was right. He wasn't alone anymore. He had allies and evidence and people who believed him not because they liked him, but because the truth was on his side. "You're right," he said. "We're not going to let him win." "Good. Now, can we go get those fluffy pancakes Yuki told me about? The ones that look like clouds?" They spent the morning eating improbable pancakes and exploring Harajuku, and Lucas made a conscious decision to be present for this, instead of spiraling about Adrian's lawsuit. Emma deserved a father who could experience joy, not just survive threats. The deployment finished 3 days later. The Helix protocol integrated flawlessly with the client's systems. Processing speed exceeded projections by 18%, and the neural pathways formed stable learning patterns within the expected time frame. The client's technical team applauded when Lucas ran the final certification test, and their CEO shook his hand with genuine warmth. "You've built something remarkable," the CEO said, "and you've proven that technical excellence combined with integrity creates value that lasts. Adrian Mercer sold us a vision. You delivered a reality." Lucas flew back to California with Emma, both of them exhausted and happy in ways they hadn't been before. Emma fell asleep against his shoulder on the plane, her notebook full of sketches and observations about Tokyo clutched in her hands. Mrs. Chen met them at the airport with tears in her eyes. "Look at you two," she said. "Adventurers?" They'd found a new apartment while Lucas was in Tokyo. Victoria's assistant had handled the logistics, and Mrs. Chen had done the walkthrough. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, bathtub, in a better neighborhood with good schools. They moved in the weekend after returning from Japan, and Emma spent hours arranging her new room with the care of someone who'd never had space that was truly hers. Lucas stood in the doorway watching her and thought about the cramped apartment they'd left behind. The place that had kept them safe when nowhere else would. He didn't regret leaving it, but he wouldn't forget what it had represented. Survival, when survival was the only option. The lawsuit dragged on for 3 months. Adrian's lawyer threw everything at them. Accusations of corporate conspiracy, character assassination, fraudulent evidence. Apex's legal team countered with documentation that proved every claim Lucas had made. The patent records, the code repositories, the emails, the architectural analysis that showed conclusively that Lucas had designed what Adrian had stolen. In February, Adrian's lawyer called Victoria to discuss settlement. "They want to drop the suit if we agree not to pursue criminal fraud charges," Victoria told Lucas. "Basically, Adrian walks away and nobody goes to jail." "What do you think?" "I think criminal prosecution would be expensive and time-consuming and might not stick because white-collar fraud is hard to prove beyond reasonable doubt. But I also think letting him walk away without consequences sets a bad precedent." Lucas thought about it. About Adrian getting away with theft just because the legal system made it easier to settle than fight. About justice being something you could buy your way out of if you had the right connections. "What happens if we say no?" he asked. "We pursue criminal charges. Adrian probably fights it for years. Even if we win, he might not see jail time, might just get probation and fines, and it'll cost us hundreds of thousands in legal fees. But it would be on his record, forever, that he's a fraud." Victoria smiled slowly. "Yes, it would." "Then let's do it. I didn't come this far to let him walk away clean." They pursued criminal charges. The district attorney's office was initially skeptical. Corporate fraud cases were notoriously hard to prosecute, but the evidence was overwhelming. In June, 8 months after Lucas had first fixed the Helix protocol in that midnight conference room, Adrian Mercer was formally charged with theft of intellectual property and fraud. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Lucas testified for 6 hours, walking the jury through the architecture he designed and explaining in painstaking detail how Adrian had stolen and claimed it. Adrian's lawyer tried to paint Lucas as bitter and delusional, a failed developer seeking revenge against a successful former colleague. But then the prosecutor introduced the code repositories, the email chains, the architectural analysis. Experts testified that Lucas's signature was embedded throughout the Helix protocol's fundamental structure. Rita and Sarah testified about how Adrian had failed to understand basic aspects of the architecture he supposedly created. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all charges. Adrian was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and ordered to pay $3 million in restitution to Apex Dynamics. The judge called it a systematic and calculated theft that undermined both innovation and the integrity of intellectual property law. Lucas sat in the courtroom listening to the verdict and felt something he'd been carrying for 6 years finally release its grip. It wasn't joy. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was just relief, pure, exhausted relief that the truth had finally won. Victoria met him outside the courthouse. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Tired, like I've been holding my breath for 6 years and just now remembered how to exhale." "That's about right. Justice is exhausting." She looked at him carefully. "What do you want to do now?" "What do you mean?" "You've got your patents, your reputation, your career back. Adrian's in prison. You've won. So what's next?" Lucas thought about that question. For 6 years, his entire existence had been defined by what Adrian had taken from him. Now that was resolved, he didn't know who he was supposed to be. "I have no idea," he admitted. "Good. That means you get to decide instead of having it decided for you. That's freedom." Over the next year, Lucas learned what freedom actually looked like. He built out his team to 15 people. He launched Helix protocol deployments in 7 countries. He co-authored 3 papers on distributed AI architecture that were published in major tech journals. His name was on 23 patents. But more importantly, he learned how to be Emma's dad without the crushing weight of survival mode. They took weekend trips to national parks. They cooked elaborate dinners together in their actual kitchen. They adopted a cat that Emma named Algorithm, despite Lucas's protests. "Why Algorithm?" he'd asked. "Because she's complicated and beautiful and solves problems, like your code." Lucas couldn't argue with that logic. On a Thursday evening in October, exactly 1 year after the Tokyo deployment, Victoria called Lucas into her office. "I'm leaving Apex," she said. Lucas felt his stomach drop. "What? Why?" "Because I've done what I came here to do. The company's stable, profitable, and positioned for long-term growth. I'm ready for the next challenge." She smiled. "I'm starting my own venture capital firm, focusing on finding brilliant people who've been overlooked or underestimated, investing in actual innovation instead of people who are good at selling ideas they didn't create." "That sounds perfect for you." "It does, doesn't it? But here's the thing. I need someone to run Apex, someone who understands technology and people and what it means to build something real. Someone with integrity who won't just optimize for short-term profits." Lucas stared at her. "You're offering me CEO. I'm recommending you to the board. They'll make the final decision, but they trust my judgment. And you've proven over the past year that you can handle responsibility, manage teams, interface with clients, and make hard decisions. You're ready." "Victoria, I've been a senior architect for a year. I've never run a company. Neither had I when I took over. You learn by doing, and you won't be alone. The executive team is solid, and I'll be available for advice whenever you need it." She leaned forward. "Here's what I know about you, Lucas. You care about doing things right more than doing them fast. You value people and ideas over ego and appearances. You've been broken and put yourself back together, which means you understand resilience in ways people who've always succeeded never will. That makes you exactly the kind of leader this company needs." Lucas thought about it, about the terrified janitor he'd been a year ago, convinced he'd never matter again, about Emma asking him to fight back, about Rita saying confidence was just competence that stopped apologizing. "If I do this," he said slowly, "I want to make changes, real changes." "Like what?" like hiring practices that don't exclude people because they have gaps in their resume or unconventional backgrounds, like promoting from within based on actual ability instead of who went to the right schools, like building a culture where being wrong is acceptable as long as you learn from it and being honest is valued more than being impressive. Victoria smiled. See, you're already thinking like a CEO. Do it. Make those changes. Build something better than what Adrian corrupted. The board approved Lucas's appointment in November. He officially became CEO of Apex Dynamics on January 2nd, exactly 14 months after fixing the Helix protocol while wearing a janitor's uniform. His first act was creating a mentorship program pairing senior developers with overlooked talent, people coming back from career gaps, self-taught programmers without degrees, anyone who had ability but lacked traditional credentials. Rita ran the program. Sarah designed the technical curriculum. Mike handled infrastructure to support remote participants who couldn't afford to relocate. His second act was implementing a policy requiring that maintenance staff, administrative assistants, and everyone in non-technical roles had pathways to transfer into technical positions if they showed aptitude and interest. 2 of the night janitors ended up in the mentorship program. One of them, a woman named Carmen, who'd been cleaning the executive floor for 3 years, turned out to have a natural gift for systems architecture. How long have you been interested in this? Lucas asked her during their first mentoring session. Since I started working here. I'd watch the monitors while I cleaned, see the code, try to understand it, but nobody ever asked if I wanted to do more than empty trash cans. I know the feeling. Welcome to the team. Emma turned 10. She was still stubborn and too smart for her own good, but now she was also confident in ways Lucas hadn't been at that age. She'd learned that good things could last and that fighting back was worth it, and that her father's worth wasn't determined by his job title. On her birthday, Lucas took her back to their old apartment building. Mrs. Chen still lived there, though Lucas had offered multiple times to help her move somewhere better. "This is my home," she'd said. "I don't need better. I need familiar." They stood outside the building where Lucas had spent 4 years surviving, and Emma asked, "Do you miss it?" "Parts of it. Not the water stains or the broken window, but the simplicity maybe. When survival was the only goal, things felt clearer. Is it harder now? Having more? It's different. Having more means having more to lose. That's scarier, but it's also worth it." He looked at his daughter. "You know what I learned from all of this?" "What?" "That talent matters, but it's not enough. Integrity matters, but it's not enough either. What actually matters is refusing to accept that the world gets to decide who you are. You decide that. And if the world disagrees, you fight until it catches up." Emma thought about that. "That why you didn't give up? Even when you were cleaning floors?" "I gave up for a while. I just kept surviving while I was given up. And then I met someone who saw past the uniform and remembered I could be more than what I'd been reduced to." "Victoria?" "Yeah, and you. You never let me forget I was smart, even when I felt stupid. That matters more than you know." They went inside and had cake with Mrs. Chen, who cried and told Lucas she was proud of him approximately 15 times. Emma rolled her eyes but smiled because she knew Mrs. Chen had earned the right to be sentimental about their success. That night, Lucas stood at the window of his actual house. They'd bought one 6 months ago, with a yard and Emma's own bathroom, and space for algorithm to terrorize, and thought about everything that had changed. Adrian was in prison. Lucas was CEO. The patents bore his name. Emma had her own room and a passport full of stamps and a father who was present instead of just surviving. But more than any of that, Lucas had learned something that he wished someone had told him 6 years ago when everything fell apart. Losing everything doesn't mean you're nothing. It just means you're between versions of yourself. And if you can survive the in-between part, the cleaning floors part, the being invisible part, the wondering if you'll ever matter again part, you come out the other side knowing exactly how strong you actually are. Not strong enough to never break. Everyone breaks. Strong enough to keep functioning while broken. To rebuild yourself piece by piece, to accept help when it's offered and fight back when it's necessary, and know the difference between the two. Lucas pulled out his phone and sent a text to Victoria, who was probably working late at her new venture capital firm because she was constitutionally incapable of relaxing. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible." Her response came immediately. "You were never invisible. You were just waiting for someone to look. I'm glad I was the one who did." Lucas smiled and put his phone away. Emma called from downstairs that Algorithm had knocked over a plant again, and could he please come help because the cat was being dramatic, and she couldn't handle it alone. He went downstairs to deal with the chaos of normal life, and somewhere in the middle of cleaning up dirt and reassuring his daughter that Algorithm wasn't trying to destroy their home on purpose, Lucas realized he was happy. Not perfectly happy. Not fixed or healed or without scars. Just happy in the way humans actually get to be happy. Messy and complicated and good enough. And for the first time in 6 years, that felt like more than enough. It felt like winning.